Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Irene, and I will be one of your technical facilitators today, along with my colleague, George Delieu. We are very happy to have you here at the Northeast Asian Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Sustainable Development Goals. Let me give a few technical guidance instructions that will support you in your experience of the forum today. This meeting will be recorded. It is now currently broadcasting live onto YouTube. We are in Zoom webinar, so you have the option to use the Q&A function to submit any questions that you might have. PowerPoint's use will also be made available on the website, and you're also more than welcome to write any comments and inputs that you have into the chat. And now, without further ado, I really want to make sure that we get started on time. I'm very happy to pass the floor over to Mr. Ganbold Basenjaf, the head of the SCAP East and Northeast Asia office, to start our opening session today. Over to you.
Good afternoon and good morning. Esteemed delegations from the governments, representatives from multi-stakeholders groups, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm Ganbold Basenjaf, head of UNSCAP East and Northeast Asia office. Thank you for joining the fourth Northeast Asia Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Sustainable Development Goals on turning the COVID-19 pandemic crisis into collective SDG action in Northeast Asia. This panel forums in the past have provided a unique opportunity for us to meet and have discussion among multi-stakeholders across Northeast Asia on the progress of SDG. This year, this forum was planned to be held in Hong Kong, China. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the government of China and the government of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region for their commitment and support offered to host this forum in Hong Kong, although we had to resort to the online meeting due to the pandemic in the end. The positive side, though, that we can involve more multi-stakeholders in the forum and reach out to many more participants than we can accommodate in a physical meeting. Prior to this forum, we had 3 pre-sessions to facilitate in-depth discussion. Civil society groups organized 2 separate sessions prepared for this forum. So we have counted over 250 participants joining in the forum, and I very much thank all of you for joining the discussion today. We have a very busy program today and tomorrow, so without further ado, I'd like to invite Mrs. Armida Salsea Aziz Jabana, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of SCAP, to welcome you all. So we will say the pre-recorded message for you now.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 4th Northeast Asia Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Sustainable Development Goals. The Northeast Asia sub-region was the first hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the past 3 quarters, the health emergency has evolved into a socio-economic crisis throughout the world, affecting everyone, everywhere equally. Today, the Northeast Asia faces common challenges in all dimensions of sustainable development. Inequalities, population aging, resources used in economic activities, and climate change are key areas of concern. This unprecedented crisis has wiped out many of the hard-won development gains and the achievements of the SDGs in Northeast Asia. A recent SCAP report, Turning the COVID-19 Pandemic Crisis into Collective SDG Actions in Northeast Asia, has highlighted the nature and extent of these existing and emerging development challenges in the sub-region. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome the concerted whole of government and whole of society approaches by member states to contain the severity of the COVID-19 crisis in this sub-region. The signs of gradual socio-economic recovery are certainly a result of their solutions-driven policy approach. As one of the key hubs of innovation, technology, trade, and finance, I recognize the important contributions of Northeast Asia in their continued efforts to advance SDGs and to promote development cooperation. Allow me to highlight several focus areas for your further reflection and policy priorities. Strengthen social protection and widen safety nets, especially for existing and newly emerging vulnerable groups. Embrace the accelerating digitalization, maximizing its benefits of creating new opportunities in education, healthcare, and jobs. Ensure environmental sustainability in the recovery strategies. Harness regional cooperation through enhanced partnership across sustainable connectivity and climate change within and across the subregions in Asia and the Pacific. ESCAP stands ready to work with governments and all stakeholders in advancing SDGs implementation plan in the post-COVID-19 era. I look forward to listening to your experiences and recommendations on the future course of action towards attainment of SDGs. I count on your commitment to build back better in Northeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary, for setting tone of discussion for the next 2 days with your insights. Indeed, the whole of government and whole of society approach to contain the pandemic crisis is prerequisite. For the Northeast Asia, certainly leveraging on its advanced innovation and technology and finance and trade, so it's well positioned to recover quickly. Yet we have to address adequately the policy priorities you have highlighted just now. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Tapan Mishra, UN Resident Coordinator to Mongolia, to give his remarks. Tapan, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ganbol Basanjab, ESCAP Executive Secretary Ibu Armida Salsia Alijabana, Mr. Hong Hyunjong, the Secretary General of Korea Business Council for Sustainable Development, delegations from government, and representatives from multi-stakeholder groups. This year, our efforts to support the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals has experienced a major setback. As the Executive Secretary of ESCAP just highlighted, the COVID-19 pandemic has wiped out hard-won progress in the sustainable development. Impact of the pandemic is much beyond the health emergencies. In countries like Mongolia, where reported case of infection is below 350 without any community transmission case as yet, and luckily no one has died from the pandemic so far, but the country is not immune to socioeconomic shocks associated with the pandemic. For example, economic downturn has led to larger pool of unemployed, most notably among youth. Education to vulnerable groups are hampered due to school closures and so other factors. The government from across Northeast Asia have devised various measures to respond to the pandemic, while we see a real struggle in balancing the strategies of addressing health emergencies and ensuring livelihood and well-being of people, particularly the vulnerable groups. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has launched the UN Comprehensive Response to COVID-19, highlighting 5 pillars of UN support: to save lives, to protect societies, and to rebuild better. At the country level, the UN country teams have developed a UN socioeconomic response plans to ensure coherent and collective support to the countries. UN country team in Mongolia has also implemented a comprehensive assessment, identified gaps in its programmatic response under each pillar, and has prepared its socio-economic response plan, having the 2030 agenda as a guide, including its principle of leave no one behind, to ensure sustainable and inclusive recovery by aligning recovery with sustainable development goals. To ensure that it is aligned with government priorities and visions, the UN Socio-Economic Response Plan for Mongolia was developed through consultations and engagement with the Mongolian government counterparts. Likewise, the UN in China has also been working closely with their counterparts in the government and across communities in China. Their collaboration involves direct response to the health crisis, as well as care for vulnerable populations, partnerships with employers to ensure safe workplaces, and an eye to agricultural and environmental impacts of the pandemic. We recognize that the impacts of the pandemic are unprecedented and cut across borders. In this context, the importance of cross-border coordination to address common challenges is reinforced more than ever, working towards a sustainable and inclusive economic recovery shared by all. These are some good examples of interagency collaboration that we find amongst UN agencies and government in the countries. For instance, the prompt joint actions by several countries and entities within the government, like on trade and transport, to preserve seamless connectivity, to keep the supply chains moving, especially of essential items and goods, have been commendable. Going forward, initiatives supported by countries in Northeast Asia which champion sub-regional cooperation could be used as platforms to also build back better. These include, among others, the Asia-Pacific Trade Agreement, Framework Agreement on Facilitating Paperless Trade in Asia and the Pacific, and the Intergovernmental Agreement on International Road Transport along the Asian Highway. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that partnership and engagement of multi-stakeholders are so critical in responding to the formidable challenges of overcoming the pandemic and rebuilding a better society with sustainable development goals as our guiding principle. I believe this forum will provide a unique opportunity to share experiences and forge partnerships amongst various stakeholders in your neighboring countries in Northeast Asia. Together with UNESCAP, we stand ready to support you at the country level as well as sub-regional and regional levels to implement the Sustainable Development Goals effectively. I wish you fruitful discussions and successful deliberations of the truly multi-stakeholder forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tapan, for your insights and highlighting the UN efforts towards SDGs implementation and the pandemic responses in partnership with governments and various stakeholders. As you know, this is the forum of multi-stakeholders on SDGs, and the business sector also has a critical role in the implementation of SDGs. In this regard, I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Hyunjong Hong, Secretary General of Korea Business Council for Sustainable Development, KBCSD, to deliver his remarks. Mr. Hong, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Amida Ali Shabana, Executive Secretary of UNESCAP, Mr. Tapan Mizura, UN Residence Coordinator in Mongolia, Mr. Bajanjab Gangbold, Head of UNESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to address you on the occasion of the UNESCAP Northeast Asian Multi-Stakeholder Forum on SDGs. I was entrusted to deliver an opening message on the role of the business in building back better after the COVID-19 crisis, which I hope would set the tone for today's discussion from the business perspective. The year 2020 was supposed to be the beginning of the crucial decade to deliver on the SDGs. However, the outbreak of COVID-19 is hampering this momentum, posing great challenges in various fields that the SDGs aim to address, including public health, economic growth, not to mention climate crisis. For instance, SDG 8 on decent work as GDP per capita is expected to decline by 4.2% globally in 2020. Also, SDG 13 on climate action is being challenged as already weakened economic condition to COVID-19 could trigger financial conditions for the companies that rely on carbon-intensive activities. In light of this unprecedented impact, major economies such as EU and China fast tracking system shift to digital transition at the heart of the national recovery in order to build back better and US. Korea is also spearheading the paradigm by announcing the Korean New Deal that will transform the country in the digital-based carbon neutral economy by 2030. It is no exaggeration to state that the potential of the post-COVID transformation in line with SDG commitment will not be met unless the business sector takes an active role. As such, I would like to suggest three key imperatives business and government sector must embrace in pursuit for SDGs in the post-pandemic era. The first, digital innovation, 5G, AI, and IoT should be fully integrated into SDG solutions as a key enabler for attaining the selected goals. According to the World Economic Forum, digital technology applied in SDGs area, such as manufacturing, energy, transportation, and buildings can help reduce 15% of global emissions by 2030. To gain more from these benefits as the value for promoting technology. Second, forward-looking companies has a role to play in innovating their conventional business portfolio. Given the magnitude of systemic shift underway in the wake of pandemic, only those companies that goes beyond the boundaries of their industry sectors can survive the post-COVID world and spearhead SDG implementation. Tesla's effort to shift company profile from the car manufacturer to innovative energy company speaks volume about how business sector is transforming itself in advocating post-crisis reforms aligned with global challenges such as SDGs. Last but not least, policymakers must act swiftly to create an environment conducive to new technologies and business models that can be scalable as reaching of 12 trillion US dollar by 2030 in market opportunities. UNSCOP and its members governments are encouraged to be at the forefront of resetting innovative policies and norms to build the villages between business innovation and sustainability transformation. Korea BCSD, which is a CEOly place to galvanize business action toward imperatives. With the Sustainable Business Innovation Forum, which is a high-level platform for business leaders, head of government, and the international organizations to fund the public-private solution to catalyze sustainable development by harnessing technology and innovation. This year's forum will take place on November 6th by a hybrid online and in person, and I wish to solicit UNSCAP members and the multi-stakeholders engagement in the forum. In closing, I trust that today's event will lay a cornerstone for how public and private sectors should translate SDGs into better action in this trying period. With that, I wish you the best of luck for all your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Huang, for sharing your insights on Korea's business sector's commitment and the shared responsibility on par with governments and civil society and other multi-stakeholders to respond to the COVID pandemic, recover, and building back better, and ultimately to achieve SDGs. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that the session, the first session of the forum is getting started. So the session 1, progress in the implementation of the 2030 agenda in Northeast Asia with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'd like to ask Mr. Tapan Mishra, UN Resident Coordinator to Mongolia, to moderate this first session. Over to you, Tapan.
Thank you, Ganbold. It is my pleasure and privilege to be with you in facilitating this session. As you said, the progress in the implementation of the 2030 agenda in Northeast Asia with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic is a very important session. And I would like to brief the presenters that in the less than 2 hours that we have the opening by Mr. Sangmin Nam, the Deputy Head of the SCAP East and North Asia, followed by 6 other country presentations of all 10 minutes each. The key to the session would be to have focused attention in the presentations, which is about 10 minutes. So I would ask each participant, each presenter to stick to the time. So the 10 minutes. So I'm sure there are 3 ways. Number 1, you would have timed yourself in terms of the 10 minutes. So please make sure that you stick to time. Number 2, our technical support will display the time and give you a hint. And in case that doesn't work, the third option is I would like to interrupt you, which would not be my preference. But I hope that we can stick to time. So right now, let's hope you have an excellent timekeeping in the session and a very productive and a very valuable engagement. So on this, let me begin by inviting Mr. Sangmin Nam, the Deputy Head of SCAP Northeast Asia, to make his presentation. Sangmin, the floor is yours and you have 10 minutes to you.
Thank you, Mr. Tapan Mishra. Let me share first my slide for the presentation. Sorry for delay. This I tested. It worked well, but Now I see the problem here.
Sangmin, it's Irene here. Can I do anything to support you?
I can't see the file on my screen.
All right, so we can give you a few minutes to do so.
Okay.
Here I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Sangmin, over to you.
Yes, my presentation is actually, it's not my own. It is based on our report, which has been shared with all participants. So the report is turning the COVID-19 pandemic into collective SDG action in Northeast Asia. So this presentation is a summary on key findings and the impact and related responses in Northeast Asia. So Northeast Asia has already made a good progress in SDG from 1 to 4 and 6 to 9, especially compared with the many other sub-regions in Asia Pacific. Northeast Asia or East Northeast Asia is leading the process. Nevertheless, this sub-region has also a challenge with regard to SDG 5 and SDG 10 and many other SDGs related to environment. So 2020, we are entering into the decade of action for accelerating SDGs. But meanwhile, we have been hit by this COVID-19 pandemic, and we have seen regress in many other SDGs. So before COVID-19, East and Northeast Asian countries had a relatively well-managed health system in terms of doctors and hospital beds. But with regard to government health expenditure, it was relatively low. But nevertheless, overall management, overall preparedness was relatively good compared with many other countries. So we are also looking at the impact of COVID-19 on SDGs. In this report, we look at into 3 dimensions. One is health, and second one is economic activities. Third one is a loss of jobs and livelihoods. So as of now, globally, there are 47 million people confirmed cases, and Northeast Asia, 1.8 million. In fact, out of 8 million, so 1.6 million is in Russian Federation, which account about 88%. In terms of death, so 1.2 million globally, and Northeast Asia, 34,000. Here, I would like to highlight this one interesting point. First, as Mr. Gamboldo Pasanja highlighted, we are the first one hit by COVID, but China, Japan, ROK have a relatively well managed the situation. And one of the exceptional cases is Mongolia, which has about 340 cases, but there is no single local case. So all are imported. So it is very exceptional, which is not actually known to outside. And another important element is lack of information on DPRK. And challenges faced by vulnerable population. This is certainly important elements of when we look at what is impact on SDGs, women and older persons, and also persons with a disability, migrant, refugees, and children. And with regard to women, if we look at Korea's case, the female confirmed cases is about 6 points higher than men, and older persons, especially for those 80 plus, and more than 80% of fatalities happen for this age group. And migrant and refugees, from the beginning, we saw the problem with their language barrier and then their legal status in each society, and children. So having no really, so with a less education and a less opportunity for care to receive care services. And in terms of economic activities, So we have seen relatively moderate economic downturn for China and ROK, and then heavy impact on economy in Japan and Mongolia. And also, but nevertheless, depending on sectors, the impacts are different, especially this service industry is hit heavily. And transport trade are also having problem. But this process also we see opportunities for new economic sectors and digital technologies. This slide, we look at loss of job and livelihoods, whether young people, women, and older persons, and workers in medium, small enterprises. So one point I wish to highlight is this is not only issue for today's job, but future's job. In particular, with regard to young people, they are losing opportunity for the job in the future. And saving lives, we look at these 6 Northeast Asian countries' measures to contain COVID. As you see, this green bars shows all 6 countries, like port screening, travel bans, school close are common to all countries. And contact tracing are done in 3 countries. So our report provided details. So please have a look at this report. And for reigniting growth, countries made various monetary and fiscal stimulus packages, and central bank lowered the interest rate. And with regard to enhancing social protection, one of a unique approach now, maybe it's common to many other countries, are direct cash transfer. For Mongolia, this child money, and Japan and Korea also made a direct cash transfer to all the countries. It has an implication for discussion on universal basic income in the future. In terms of a policy trajectory and policy areas, so investment in health services, healthcare services, and containment measures, relief measures to support the economy, and now economic recovery. With regard to economic recovery, we have seen countries' initiative to move to build back better, like Korea New Deal, which focuses on Green New Deal. Also, Chinese government announced the quality infrastructure.
Sang-Min, you have 2 more minutes.
This is my last slides. So in terms of sub-regional cooperation, sub-regional action, I would like to highlight 4 points. First one is scaling up health emergency preparedness. China, Japan, Korea created their tripartite mechanism in 2007, but it is limited only to 3 countries, and it was not very effective during the current crisis. So we have to find a way to scale up. And supporting safe and resilient transport. This border clause was common for many countries. So how to make transport trade connectivity operational during this crisis will be important area for sub-regional cooperation. And promoting inclusive digital transformation. Digital transformation is common, but whether it is inclusive for all society, all sectors of society is a question. So how to make inclusive digital transformation will be a key to post-COVID. And sustainable green recovery. So we are now looking at Green New Deal, or now many countries, China, Japan, Korea announced the carbon neutrality goal by 2050. So we have to look at how we can work on this in a collective way. Thank you very much for your attention. Let me conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sang-Min. That was a very useful and a very well-researched presentation. I think it will be very valuable, the guidance that you provided. I'm extremely thankful for ESCAP for putting this together. I'm sure you're going to share this Now, may I request each of the member states, the 6 of them, to make their 10-minute presentation to share their progress on the SDG implementation in the wake of the COVID-19 response. So may I begin with first the permanent representative of China to ESCAP, Mr. K. Yusheng. Mr. K. Yusheng, may I also request, while a speaker is presenting, if others can switch off their videos and their microphones, it will help us in managing the bandwidth better. So thank you so much. Over to you, Mr. K. Yusheng.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Taban Misra, the UN coordinator in Mongolia, Mr. Genbold Basenja, head of the ESCAP East and Northeast Asia Office, distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to attend this year's Northeast Asia Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Sustainable Development Goals. I would like to thank the Northeast Sub-Regional Office of ESCAP for its arrangement for today's meeting, and I also wish the meeting a success. As for now, the world enters a period of turbulence change. The COVID-19 pandemic is spreading globally, as the predecessor species also spoke about that. The world economy is in recession. The trade protectionism is on the rise, and the unilateralism and hegemonism are rampant. All of these are casting heavy impact on the efforts in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development of the whole world, including Northeast Asia. Facing these challenges, the Chinese government, adhering unswervingly to the philosophy of people-centered development, take determined and unremitting efforts in addressing numerous difficulties, strive for implementation of the 2030 Agenda, and making the development result more and more equitable to benefit the people. Here, I would like to introduce in general China's experience of implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development from the following aspect. Later on, my colleague from the government of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of China will introduce the implementation progress in Hong Kong SAR. First, poverty eradication. To eliminate poverty and to improve people's livelihood is always an important mission of the Chinese government. Practicing people-centered philosophy of development, we implement the targeted poverty alleviation strategy. Over the past 5 years, 55.75 million Chinese rural poor people have been lifted out of poverty. From 2012 to 2019, the number of people living in poverty decreased from 98.99 million to 5.51 million, meaning over 10 million people were lifted out of poverty every year in the past 7 consecutive years. Over 4 decades of reforming and opening up, more than 700 million Chinese people have been lifted out of poverty, which contributed to more than 70% of the world's poverty reduction. Currently, the Chinese government and the Chinese people are now fighting a tough battle against poverty to ensure that all rural poor people will be lifted out of poverty under the current standard by the end of 2020, which will write the most successful poverty alleviation story in the human history. Second, green development. The President of China, His Excellency Xi Jinping, pointed out that lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets. Guided by the concept of ecological civilization, China sticks to the principle of innovative, coordinated, green, open, and inclusive development, and takes a path of green, low carbon, and sustainable development. For the past 10 years, China has topped the world in forest resource increase, with more than 70 million hectares of land afforested. 90% of terrestrial ecosystem types and 85% of key wild animal populations are under effective protection. At this year's high-level meeting to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, His Excellency President Xi Jinping has announced that China aims to have carbon dioxide emissions peak before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. This is a solemn commitment of China to address climate change and a solid action to jointly build a clean and beautiful world. Third, inclusive development. China is accelerating its education modernization. In 2019, there were about 2.53 million schools of all types of education at all levels, with a total of 283 million students. The net enrollment rate of compulsory education for primary schools reached to 99.94%. China has built the world's largest social protection system with basic medical insurance covering 1.3 billion people and basic pension insurance covering 1 billion people. China has continuously strengthened the protection of women's rights. Women now account for more than 40% of all employees in our society. China takes equality, participation, and sharing this principle as the goal in the protection and promotion of the rights and interest of disabled persons and ensure their basic livelihood. By 2018, a total of 25.61 million urban and rural people with disabilities in China have participated in social endowment insurance, and 10.24 million disabled people received their pensions. Fourth, promotion of global partnership. China has actively participated in the South-South Cooperation for Common Development. China United Nations Peace and Development Trust Fund has established a sub-fund on 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It has successfully implemented 27 projects in the past 3 years, benefiting 49 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. China has promoted in-depth alignment of the Belt and Road Initiative with the 2030 Agenda and has cooperated to implement a large number of railway, highway, marine infrastructure projects, renewable energy projects, and people's well-being projects, contributing to improvement of people's livelihoods and well-being in countries along the road. China has officially joined the COVAX. This is an important step China has taken to uphold the concept of a shared community of health for all and to honor its commitment to turn COVID-19 vaccines into a global good. Mr. Chair, in the 5th plenary session of the 19th Central Committee of the CPC, which was just concluded last week in Beijing, the long-term goal of basically realizing socialist modernization by 2030 has been put forward. China has also laid down the major economic and social development goals for the 14th five-year plan, which includes new strides in economic development, new steps to be taken in reform and opening up, new improvements to be brought in social, ethical, and civilization, new progress to be achieved in ecological civilization, new increases to be reached in people's livelihood and welfare, new improvement to be accomplished in national governance capacity. Chinese government and Chinese people we exert to the full use of wisdom and diligence to achieve the above goals with firm confidence and hard working. Mr. Chair, at the high-level meeting to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations in September, world leaders strongly reaffirmed the collective commitment to multilateralism, strengthening solidarity and collaboration, and called for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as the blueprint to overcome the pandemic and build it back better, with the goal of leaving no one behind. Northeast Asian countries should have firm confidence and determination to act consistently to promote sustainable and inclusive economic recovery and growth with a clear way forward. First, unity and cooperation are the key to address challenges ahead. The experience of fighting the pandemic shows that solidarity and collaboration are indispensable on global challenges. Only by adhering to the spirit of unity and a shared future for mankind can the international community address common challenges and achieve common development. We should jointly uphold multilateralism, strongly opposed to unilateralism and international bullying. And work for a peaceful and tranquil international environment for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Second, development should remain as top priority with key areas. Development is the master key to solve all problems. We must insist on people-centered thinking, focus on the implementation of sustainable development goals in key areas such as no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, decent work, and infrastructure constructions, so as to effectively guarantee and enhance the well-being of the people. Special attention should be paid to the difficulties and challenges that developing countries are facing, and help should be extended to developing countries for quick and better recovery. Third, we must continue to promote green development and work for high quality and resilient recovery. Actions should be strengthened to tackle climate change, protect biodiversity, and promote the transition to a low-carbon economy. Opportunities of new technological and industrial resolutions could be explored to fully tap the potentials such as digital economy and clean energy. We notice that several countries in Northeast Asia have also announced that they will strive to achieve carbon neutrality. This will make an important contribution to global cooperation on climate change. Fourth, partnerships should be strengthened with a focus on common development. The international community should deepen global cooperation, promote multilateralism, maintain the role of the United Nations, and encourage UNESCO to play a more active role in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Asia Pacific. North-South cooperation is still the main channel of cooperation. Developed countries should fulfill the commitments of ODA to support developing countries. The developing countries' efforts in exploring their own development paths based on national conditions must be respected. Developing countries are encouraged to reinforce South-South cooperation and strive to achieve self-improvement. Mr. Chair, Northeast Asia is the stabilizer of global economy and will be the engine of economic recovery from the pandemic. Future cooperation is bright and broad for all of us in our sub-region. We should uphold solidarity and cooperation in turning our commitments into actions and making our initiative to bear fruit. And we should build a community with a shared future for mankind and a more prosperous and a beautiful Northeast Asia for all. I thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. K. Yusheng. You went a little beyond time, but I wanted to give you this floor because you were speaking so passionately about a very well thought through plan. And thank you for sharing. Very impressive presentation. Look forward to engaging with you for all the partnerships that you talked about. I'm sure all of us would be very happy to work on the collective areas of our work. So thank you again. And may I now request Mr. Tatsuya Iwasaki, the Deputy Director of the Global Issues and the Cooperation Division in the International Cooperation Bureau in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. So, Iwasaki-san, floor is yours. Konnichiwa.
Thank you. Konnichiwa.
The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Tatsuya, your presentation will come up in just a second.
So while we speak, Mr. Tatsuya, we lost a little time. We are a little behind schedule. So may I request that we try and stick to time? My humble apologies as the moderator. So every presentation, if we go beyond, then we will have a little overrun. So I'd like to
thank you, Mr. Tapan Mishra. Thank you. And hello, everyone. Let me first express my gratitude to the ESCAP East and Northeast Asia office for organizing this valuable forum, despite difficult situations due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, let me explain briefly Japan's efforts and its progress in the implementation of the SDGs with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Japan has been making efforts both in Japan and in cooperation with other countries to achieve sustainable, diverse, and inclusive societies worldwide where no one is left behind. In 2016, the government of Japan established the SDGs Promotion Headquarters, which is led by Prime Minister and consists of all ministers. In the same year, the headquarters adopted the SDGs Implementation Guiding Principles. In 2017, the headquarters created the Japan SDGs Award to recognize and disseminate good practices of both public and private sectors toward achieving SDGs. Furthermore, the headquarters decided SDGs Action Plan 2018, which includes 3 pillars of Japan's SDGs model. Then, based on the guiding principles and 3 pillars, Japan has developed action plans for each year to further strengthen and expand its efforts. Last year, in December, the headquarters revised SDGs Implementation Guiding Principles for the first time and decided the action plan for 2020. Next slide, please. The SDGs Implementation Guiding Principle was revised based on the latest domestic and international trends, efforts of the past 4 years, and the recommendations of the members of the SDGs Promotion Roundtable meeting and public comments. It begins with introduction, then it analyzes the latest development, such as Japan's efforts to date, and assessment of the situation. And it sets 8 priority areas, such as gender equality, good health, growth markets, sustainable land use, energy conservation, biodiversity, peaceful society, means for the implementation. Next slide, please. There are 5 principles which should be taken into account in all priority areas in the course of implementation: universality, inclusiveness, participatory, integration, and transparency and accountability. Regarding framework for further promotion, with this revision, the function of the SDGs promotion headquarters, the system of roundtable meetings, and public relations and awareness raising activities will be further strengthened. As for the follow-up and review, periodic check and review of the implementation and a 4-year review of the guiding principles will be carried out. Next, please. Action. Next. Yeah, thank you. Action Plan 2020 was decided in December last year under the revised guiding principles to reinforce the commitment to the decade of action. This incorporates concrete initiatives and actions of the government to be implemented based on the Japanese SDGs model with the 3 pillars. The first pillar, business and innovation, includes actions such as further support for ESG investment, promotion of STI for SDGs, including development of roadmaps. The second pillar, regional revitalization driven by the SDGs, includes initiatives such as promotion of regional revitalization through SDGs Future City, creation of resilient cities by strengthening disaster risk reduction efforts, construction of sound material cycle society by further promoting measures to combat climate change and marine plastic waste. The third pillar, empowerment of next generation and women, includes work style reform, promotion of active participation of women, and education and health, such as promotion of education for sustainable development and universal health coverage. Next slide, please. The SDGs Promotion Headquarters has given Japan SDGs Awards to the companies and organizations that are making outstanding efforts to contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. At the third award ceremony held in last December, the Uomachi Shopping Street Association in Kitakyushu City received the Chief's Award. This is the first shopping street association that made SDGs declaration and has been promoting SDGs and tackling local issues such as supporting homeless people, young entrepreneurs, and working mothers, reducing food waste, and so on. In addition, 10 organizations were awarded. Next, please. Next, please. Yeah. This year, the 9th meeting of the SDGs Promotion Headquarters scheduled for June was postponed to December due to the COVID-19. But in the meantime, the roundtable meeting system was strengthened by creating task-specific subcommittees. In addition to this, we have been working to further promote the SDGs using also online platform in light of the impact of the COVID-19. In July of this year, Foreign Minister Motegi issued a statement to the high-level political forum. Minister Motegi emphasized the importance of international cooperation to help prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, and he mentioned that based on the principle of leaving no one behind and the notion of human security, which focuses on the most vulnerable, Japan has worked bilaterally and through international cooperations to provide assistance to developing countries where healthcare systems are fragile. Furthermore, reminding that this year marks year 1 of the decade of action, he stressed Japan will be working with the international community, mindful of the ideals of SDGs, to step up our efforts more than before. In September, Prime Minister Suga delivered his statement at the general debate of UN General Assembly. He emphasized that Japan will proactively lead international efforts in collaboration with other countries with the goal of leaving no one's health behind towards achieving universal health coverage, guided by the principle of human security against the unprecedented crisis caused by the COVID-19. This December, The SDGs Promotion Headquarters will hold a meeting to decide the action plan for next year and the fourth SDGs award ceremony. For next year, preparations are underway for the Japan SDGs Action Festival in Yokohama in March. This aims to further increase awareness of the SDGs in Japan and promote efforts to take concrete actions with the participation of all stakeholders. And along with Japan SDGs Action Festival, SDG Global Festival or Action from Japan is planned to be held by mainly UNDP as a part of the SDG Global Festival of Action, which has been held by UN SDG Action Campaign every year since 2017. In July, at the HLPF, Japan is planning its second voluntary national review after 2017. For that, Japan had just started discussions. We are facing unprecedented crisis due to the COVID-19 pandemic. To overcome this crisis and build back better requires actions by all stakeholders towards achieving the SDGs. As I mentioned before, the government of Japan has worked bilaterally and through international organizations to provide assistance to developing countries. The government of Japan will continue to make every effort for the end of the COVID-19 pandemic and to work in close collaboration with stakeholders in Japan and the international community to achieve societies where no one is left behind, taking advantage of the opportunities such as the event in Yokohama next March, Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games, and the Osaka Kansai Expo 2025. Thank you for your attention.
Tatsuya-san, Subarashi, wonderful presentation, very good in time and very inspiring. And we are also hoping to learn from some of the good examples that you shared from Japan that we would like to also emulate and try and imbibe. So we look forward to further discussions with support from our SCAP colleagues. And this is a great example that you shared on behalf of the government of Japan. Very impressive. Thank you. May I now move to the government of Mongolia and the Senior Specialist for Development Policy and Planning Department in the National Development Agency of Mongolia, Ms. Susanna Sumku. Susanna?
Hello, yes, you can hear me? Great.
We can hear you, and we welcome you. You have 10 minutes. Are you going to share your own screen or does somebody need any help?
Yes, I will share my own screen. Okay, 1 second. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen. Put it on slide mode, on slideshow mode, and we are good to go.
Okay.
Thank you,
Great.
Susanna, and welcome.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much, Mr. Tapan Mishra, moderator of this session, as well as the organizers of this very important meeting, Northeast Asia SCAP, as well as other colleagues. So without further ado, I will go into my presentation. Brief introduction to how Mongolia's progress is happening in terms of implementing the SDGs. So I do want to highlight Mongolia has been one of the first countries to adopt the SDGs. Only about 6 months following the adoption of the SDGs, the global community, the Parliament of Mongolia approved its long-term development strategy reflecting the concept of sustainable development. And moving since then, since 2016, the government of Mongolia has been setting out the institutional structures for implementing the SDGs. Now, as mentioned during the previous presentations, institutionalization and localization of sustainable development goals is crucial to meeting the targets and the objectives that we aim to achieve. So as such, at the parliament level, Mongolia has established the subcommittee on SDGs, which is under the Standing Committee on Social Policy, Education, Culture, and Science of the Parliament. And at the Parliament government level, we have the National Council for Sustainable Development, which is headed by the Prime Minister, and it is planned to be extended to include multi-stakeholders. So we do realize the importance of non-government multi-stakeholders in the achievement of SDGs. Now, when we move down to the government, we do realize that most of the SDG technical work is done through the government-specific agencies, and it is championed through policy coordination and centralized coordination into local government as well. And as such, the National Development Agency is mandated to provide technical policy support and ensure mainstreaming of the SDGs through integrated systematic tools and approaches. Of course, National Statistics Office is to strengthen SDG indicators and data collection. So all of these institutional structures together work quite closely, and we do realize the importance of whole of government and whole of society approaches. And with the importance of these approaches, Mongolia has devised our first volunteer national review last year. And so within the reports, as emphasized through a colleague from China, it is quite important that SDG implementation does address national development priorities and challenges. And so we see that SDGs as a guiding principle, as well as an objective for changing the paradigm of development in Mongolia. So as such, reflecting back to the 20-30 years of Mongolia's development, the Parliament of Mongolia has approved a long-term development vision of Mongolia document this May of 2020. And it does integrate the concept of sustainable development. For instance, in the 6th chapter, Green Development, it statutes that Mongolia's economic development should be considerate of water resources and the implications of economic activities in the environment. And overall principle of this new long-term development policy is people-centered again. So it does align with the 5 Ps of the SDGs. And we see that the comprehensiveness and integratedness of this long-term policy will be a guiding principle for Mongolia to not only tackle the difficult, complex, interrelated development challenges in Mongolia, but also achieve sustainable development goals in the meantime. So some of the key recent updates and achievements we've had. This year in May, the Parliament of Mongolia has approved the revision of the Law on Development Policy Planning and Management. The government of Mongolia does recognize that unless we implement the SDGs through integrated policy planning and budgeting interlinkages, it won't be possible to simply reach sustainable development targets. So achieving SDGs through planning is a crucial aspect of achieving SDGs. In addition, in August of this year, the government approved our first 5-year development policy, which is an integrated and financially sourced development policy, which informs the government action program, which have also approved. So all of these 3 different long, medium, and short-term policy I've just mentioned, according to the Law on Development Policy Planning and Management, exhibit the policy coherence, which we are working on quite attentively in ensuring. So as such, the government of Mongolia, as well as National Development Agency, for the past 2-3 years, we've been working hard in coming up with the necessarily systems thinking tools for assessing policy coherence, both vertically and horizontally, and we've championed it through legislating it into policy planning and policy budget planning procedures. In addition, we do realize that current existing policies need to be assessed to make sure that SDGs are truly and systematically mainstreamed into existing policy documents. So we've done a comprehensive assessment of existing policy documents in 2029. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, without having national level SDG targets and indicators, it just won't be possible to meet the targets that we wish to attain by 2030. As such, Mongolia has worked with not only the parliament level, but also government stakeholders, including non-government organizations. We've devised our national SDG targets and indicators, which are being used to inform medium and short-term policies. And on top of that, National Development Agency has been giving heavy focus on ensuring environment, economy, society symbiosis without the addressing of the trade-offs and maximizing benefits across these development pillars, it just won't be possible for us to achieve sustainable development. One good case I do want to address is the budgeting for SDGs initiative that has been ongoing in Mongolia. We've piloted health, environment sectors first to make sure SDG indicators and targets are integrated into budgeting of government budgeting. And as Mr. Tapan Mishra has mentioned earlier, integrated national financing framework is also crucial in establishing the institutional and working mechanisms for government to mobilize necessary financing sources, but also make sure that the contributions and the efforts made by private sector and civil society is in fact directed towards meeting long, medium-term policy targets, and in fact it is addressed. But again, challenges do remain. Mongolia is vulnerable to factors not entirely to our own control, as well as factors amenable to policy. So external factors, including climate change, natural disasters, global development uncertainties, including COVID, remain to be major challenges in policy planning and achievement of SDGs. But what I want to address with the notion of COVID is that what COVID has done to Mongolia is to really realize the fundamental development infrastructure challenges that we have, health system challenges that we have. But on the bright side, as of November 3rd, Mongolian government has taken early and decisive measures to prevent the inflow and outbreak of COVID-19. As Mr. Sang-min mentioned, Mongolia has about 350 confirmed cases. All of them are imported, which is a good indication of the early actions that we've taken beginning in July of this year. Some of the key highlights, the Parliament of Mongolia approved a law on preventing combating COVID-19, which was paralleled with an economic stimulus packages, which supports the vulnerable population, including marginalized groups. And in addition to that, halting of international commercial flights, which is a common sight we see across many different Asian countries. But I do want to address that despite the limited cases confirmed in Mongolia, household level shocks caused by COVID-19 can be long-lasting and disproportionately hit the poor and vulnerable the hardest. So I do want to call other Northeast Asian countries to think about the impact in disproportionately poor and vulnerable groups when we move forward with the implementation of the SDGs. Issues such as impact on healthcare accessibility, lack of hospital equipment, food consumption, and nutrition issues have been raised even more so during COVID. Female-headed households are burdened with unpaid care, working shorter hours. Again, digital divide, as mentioned earlier, for children's learning. And again, all of this is bringing up the inequality challenges that we face, the fundamental challenges. So what do we need to do moving forward? Because of the comprehensiveness and interconnectedness of sustainable development objectives, Mongolian government realizes that we do need a paradigm shift in how we govern economic, environmental, and social development pillars, including the policies that we devise for them. So as such, with COVID, we realized that we need to strengthen healthcare service infrastructure so that everyone can reach healthcare services, devising inclusive strategies for smart schooling, and of course, orienting economic stimulus actions to widening social protection, ensuring the livelihoods of well-being of those that are marginalized groups, including female-headed households, strengthening, and all of these issues are only to be realized with the strengthening of governance systems for institutionalizing SDGs. And this can be done through mobilizing whole of government action, where participation is in fact realized at all levels, implementing policy coherence approaches for SDGs, whether that is using systems, dynamic approaches, systems thinking methods. And this in fact would help us to maximize synergies and minimize trade-offs across economic growth disparities, inequality disparities, balancing domestic and international priorities. So we don't lose, we don't trade off the important aspects that we should be considering, addressing long-term effects of policies. Again, thinking of COVID with the scenarios that we often can't imagine. Like COVID wasn't really planned. So how do we devise strategies so we are more ready and resilient for those challenges? Improving linkages across policy planning and budgeting. So even though these sort of strategies do seem quite technical, these are really imperative for developing countries like Mongolia to strengthening the basis for building resilient societies and reactions to difficult challenges. Maintaining financial prudence is, of course, crucial, supporting firms through small, medium enterprises, and of course, diversifying financing means to implementing the SDGs. And lastly, I do want to emphasize the importance of partnerships. So the government of Mongolia has been working with the UN and bilateral and multilateral organizations and in establishing a multi-stakeholder platform so that civil society organizations, private sector, and citizens are more involved in the policy planning and policy development phases, so that their voices are heard at the start of the policy device. So this would be imperative in implementing the SDGs, and Mongolia has taken important action towards it, but we do realize that there's still room for Mongolia to work with other Northeast Asian countries as well as with multilateral organizations to accelerate process towards achieving sustainable development. So I thank you for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Susanna. If there are questions at the end, we will come back to you, but your very impressive presentation. And thank you to you, and we look forward to working with you, the National Development Agency and the Government of Mongolia and all the stakeholders to work together. Thank you again. Now may I request the Director, Division of Development Policy, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Korea, Ms. Hong Sang-hee. Please, the floor is yours. The next 10 minutes is yours. 반갑습니다.
Thank you, Chair, for the kind introduction. I would like to start my presentation first by thanking ASCAP East and East Asia Office for inviting to this very important forum. First of all, I would like to just introduce some milestone of Korea's national framework and experts of implementing SDGs. Even before the adoption of SDG in 2015, the Korean government enacted the Framework Act on Sustainable Development in 2007, incorporating the core concept of SDGs. The third National Basic Plan for Sustainable Development for the year 2016 to 2035, formulated in 2016, fully adopted principles of SDGs, putting forward sustainable development as a national vision. In 2018, as part of the efforts to localize the SDG, Korea established the K-SDGs, taking into account the specific national priorities and context. Under the leadership of the Ministry of Environment and in close consultation with the multi-stakeholders, including civil society and academia, 5 strategies, 7 goals, 122 targets, and 214 indicators were developed. To be country-specific, KSG was modified to include 14 new targets and 199 new indicators. For example, Korea excluded the poverty indicator and included indicator related to obesity and low fertility rate. Currently, we are revising some of the targets and indicators to reflect better the SDGs. This year, for the first time, the Korea embarked on a national review exercise on the SDGs. The draft National Sustainable Development Report 2020, issued by the Commission on Sustainable Development, evaluate the implementation of KSDG by analyzing 197 out of 214 indexes. Among these, 99 indexes that were officially approved to have a statistical significance were reviewed. As a result, 44% of the indexes, including the environmental sector, is expected to reach the target by 2013 at 30, while the social indexes, such as inequality, needs more progress. At the international level, Korea ranked 20th among 166 countries in overall performance by Sustainable Development Solution Network. Good progress was made in quality education, while little progress was reported in gender equality, reducing inequality, climate action, and partnership for the goals. Most notably, SDSN evaluated that Korea most effectively responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. While the COVID-19 poses unprecedented global challenges to all humanity, Korea has cited as a model case for effectively dealing with the COVID-19 related challenges based on the 3T principle, that are test, trace, and treat. As Dr. Nam mentioned earlier, in the time of a crisis, the Korean government has put forth the Korean New Deal as a new strategy for sustainable development and sustainable growth in the era of COVID-19 and beyond. The strategy comprised of 3 policy pillars: the Digital New Deal, Green New Deal, and a social safety net. On the global stage, Korea is also actively participating in the global, regional, and sub-regional networks on SDGs, including the ASCAP, UN HLPF, OECD, and G20. In parallel, we are engaging in active dialogue with our donors and partner countries to share experience and learn from one another. This slide briefly outlines our ODA strategy aligned to the SDGs, the Basic Act of International Development Cooperation, and the Midterm Strategy for Development Cooperation for year 2015 to 2020 clearly set out our contribution to the implementation of SDG as the target of Korea's development cooperation. To implement the strategy, Korean government is committed to scaling up its ODA volume while forging inclusive partnership with the civil society, private sector, and academia. This graph shows the trends of Korea's ODA. Korea's ODA volume consistently increased, registering at $2.68 billion in 2019. The average growth rate of ODA over the past 10 years was about 12%, the highest among DAC members. Korea has allocated over 30% of its ODA on the sectors of education, health, and social and economic infrastructure, and this reflects our view that human resources development and institutional capacity building are key to facilitate the national development. To support developing countries in tackling the COVID-19 pandemic, the Korean government plans to provide over $510 million in aid by the end of this year. As part of the scheme, the Korean government recently launched an ODA initiative called Building Trust that entails humanitarian assistance, capacity building in health sector, and assistance in mitigating socio-economic impact in the mid and long term. Also, Korea pledged $10 million to the COVAX AMC to support an equitable access to the COVID-19 vaccines. In closing, I would like to reaffirm Korea's strong commitments, working closely with the diverse stakeholders to address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on vulnerable groups, including women, children, persons with disability, in order to build back better and to make a better world that leaves no one behind. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Hong Sang-hee. That is a very impressive presentation, and we look forward to working with the Republic of Korea, and thank you for the Korean government for the wonderful initiatives. And you also managed time very well, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
May I now invite the Deputy Head of the Department of Multilateral Cooperation and Special Projects in the Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation, Mr. Anton Setsov.
Thank you, Chair. It's my pleasure to be with you today and present Russia's approach to SDG implementation and the current challenges that are here with us with the COVID-19 crisis. I will share my screen with you. Sorry, there seems to be an issue.
Technical support.
Screen sharing.
Hi, Anton. I'm Irene. I can help you out. What's the issue at the moment?
I'm afraid I cannot.
See your slides?
Share my screen. Can you do that for me, please, if you have the presentation?
I can. Why don't you go ahead and start talking, and I will try to bring it up as soon as I can.
So this year, Russia presented its first voluntary national review at the high-level political forum for sustainable development at the UN. It was presented by the Minister of Economic Development, Maxim Reshetnikov. And since this was our first experience, it helped us to collect our understanding of how the SDGs are implemented and how what more we can do to make them work for all. Now, one important, can I have the first slide, please? One important thing, of course, is that the COVID crisis introduced significant adjustments to both our plans and to the current situation. So in my short presentation, I will try to cover both the 5-year perspective since the adoption of the SDGs in 2015 and the day-to-day issues of dealing with the COVID crisis and building a sustainable recovery for the future. Now, this July, the President of the Russian Federation approved 5 new national development goals with the same timeline up to 2030. And they cover all 3 aspects of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. These goals, for example, include goals on health and well-being, on self-fulfillment, on creating a comfortable and safe living environment, including a significant reduction in harmful emissions. It includes targets on decent and effective jobs and, of course, on digital transformation, one key issue that I believe will also be discussed in this forum today later. Now, to implement those national goals, the government has developed a national action plan, which will help us restore employment, to support household incomes, ensure long-term growth and structural changes to the economy. Can I have the next slide, please? The COVID pandemic, of course, affected all sectors of the economy, including production, trade, our external relations, investment, but most importantly, services, air traffic, and tourist flows. The national projections show that this year, the Russia's GDP will decline by 3.9%, but will rebound next year and recover by 3.3%. So this means that we will reach pre-crisis levels of economic development by the 3rd quarter of 2021. What really helped us to deal with the issue is that we have managed to create a balanced budget and monetary policy that was implemented in recent years, and it created a basis for us to introduce anti-crisis measures. These measures focus on 2 key directions: on providing support for entrepreneurs in most affected sectors, especially for small and medium enterprises, and in providing support for the most vulnerable groups of the population. Now, we have seen a presentation today on key ways of supporting economic activity in our sub-region, and I have to say that a lot of those measures were taken in Russia as well. Those included soft lending programs, deferrals of taxes, insurance premiums, rent payments, and loans. We extended validity periods for more than 70 kinds of permits, which is particularly important for small and medium enterprises. We canceled almost all planned and unscheduled inspections for businesses, provided grants for wage payments, and several other measures as well. Now, next slide, please. When we talk about social support, it was one of the key measures for us, both in terms of the last 5 years in implementing the sustainable agenda in Russia and in reacting to the COVID crisis. When we talk about particularly about SDGs, the goal of eradicating extreme poverty in Russia, of course, is mostly achieved. However, we consider halving poverty by the national poverty line by 2030 from the 2017 level to be a priority for the government's activities. And in order to achieve that, we have targeted federal and regional programs for low-income families, and particularly families with children. This is the main target of our poverty reduction strategy. And of course, as part of a COVID-19 response program, we have arranged for special grants and increased unemployment benefits threefold. In terms of SDG 3, our key target is achieving a life expectancy up to 78 years. That is one of the key goals of the national project, which is called healthcare. And in order to support this goal and in order to achieve SDG 3 in the COVID-19 context, we have abolished customs duties for medicines and medical devices, as well as established a green corridor for key essential goods and products. Now, I will not speak in detail about our efforts in developing a workable and efficient COVID-19 vaccine, though I have to mention the Sputnik 5 vaccine, where we have received already requests for 1 billion doses globally, and we hope that this would be a significant contribution of our nation to a global effort to combat the pandemic. Next slide, please. In terms of social inclusion, we have been continuously working on reducing inequalities, and of course the main instrument for that is supporting incomes for low-income groups of population. In terms of gender equality, we have a dedicated strategy of action in the interest of women, which ensures that we mainstream inclusion of women in international economic development. And on this particular slide, you can see that the Human Development Index for women in Russia is higher than that for men. One particularly important issue in terms of inclusion that I want to highlight is evening out the differences in socioeconomic development for different regions of the country. Of course, given our geography, this is a particularly important issue, and reducing the interregional differentiation for us is a key target, particularly via the development of rural and remote areas, which you can imagine is an important issue for Russia. And I have to report that in our international activities, we also attribute particular importance to this issue. And this year, during the SCO Leaders Summit, we expect to launch an initiative to develop and integrate regional remote areas throughout this Shanghai Cooperation Organization space. And we have developed a bank of best solutions in this area, which includes particular solutions in technological solutions that will allow us to speed up socioeconomic development in remote and rural areas, in particular in the areas of infrastructure, financial inclusion, and public services. Next slide, please. Now, the provision of public services, especially in the digital form, is a particular priority that we attribute to within SDG 16. Since 2009, we have a growing network of public services centers that serve as a single window for the Russian population to get public services and government services that they need. There are over 13,000 centers right now, which cover 97% of the population with these services. Of course, during the COVID crisis, many of them switched to different options of remote work and digital service provision, and that really helps us maintain a level of service quality while ensuring the safety and well-being of the population. Next slide, please. In terms of SDG 13, as part of the implementation of measures aimed to adapt to climate change, in 2019, the government approved a national plan for adaptation to climate change up to 2022, which will be followed by specific measures and plans to adapt the economy and well-being of the people in different areas and sectors to the changing climate. Moreover, as part of our implementation of the Paris Agreement, we are finalizing the national strategy for low carbon development until 2050, as well as our updated NDC. Now, one recent addition to this, this scope of instruments that we plan to use to adapt to climate change is a Russian system of climate projects, which will build a framework to determine mechanisms of a national system and to help it connect closely with international systems. Now, one particular issue I would like to cover as a final point of my presentation, next slide please, is the inclusion of Russian businesses into the SDG agenda. Now there's a lot to demonstrate here, and it gives us great pleasure to see Russian businesses lead the way in many areas globally in terms of sustainably conducting businesses and also contributing to sustainable development technology and trends globally. Now, there are over 40 case studies in our Volunteer National Review, which I call for you to address. Now, can I see the final slide, please? And next one. Next slide, please. So to conclude, this is the link to our VNR. I would welcome all the participants to take a look at it and avail yourself of the data. And my final point is that we believe that, of course, regional integration can serve as a very important cushion for the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and help us build back better and achieve a sustainable recovery up to 2030. For us, we, of course, particularly the first counter of our regional integration is the Eurasian Economic Union, where we also could consider that a contribution to our region's SDG implementation could be made. And I thank you for your attention, and please forgive me for going beyond the time frame. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Anton Satev. It's very impressive, and thank you for sharing the VNR link. We certainly would look forward to engaging with this further. So very useful. So with all the presentations so far, the last 6 presentation is from the Commissioner of Inclusive Dispute Avoidance and Resolution Office, Department of Justice of Hong Kong, SAR, Government of China, Mr. James Ding, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Tapan Mishra. You can hear me clearly?
Very clearly.
Good. Let me share my screen. Yeah, you can see the screen, right?
Clearly.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I must thank the organizers, in particular, ESCAPE East and Northeast Asian Office for organizing this important forum. As you have heard, originally it is the plan to have the forum in Hong Kong, China, but unfortunately due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have this forum online. But I look forward to welcoming you to Hong Kong in the very near future. I'm from the Department of Justice of Hong Kong, China, and I will speak in a more legalistic way, and from the perspective of a lawyer, maybe, in view of the recent implementation of the UN SDG as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We see that the 17 goals under the agenda are interconnected, and we consider that rule of law is a pillar underpin all these 70 SDGs. In particular, Goal 16 aims to promote peaceful and inclusive society for sustainable development, providing access to justice for all and building effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Some of the previous speakers have already commented on the impact of COVID-19. I will not repeat that. Just to give you some information about Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, we have more than 5,000 cases, with unfortunately more than 100 deaths as a result of the COVID-19. It has a severe impact on Hong Kong's economies. We have a rising employment rate, which is 6.4%. That is 16 years high for us. And in particular, the youth unemployment rate for those aged between 20 and 24 is at 20.1%. In particular, the unemployment rate in several sectors is particularly serious, as you can imagine, those hard hit by the pandemic in the hotel business, some tourism-related sectors in particular. To give you an overall approach of how Hong Kong, China deal with COVID-19, we have adopted an approach of, I call it recognize, strategize, legalize, and revitalize. We need to recognize and identify the risk of COVID-19 at a very early stage. We have to act with speed, and we have to identify the risk and take actions swiftly, because it's really important for us that we have to take the first move at a very speedy time. Once we have identified the risk, and we need to strategize, we need to formulate the strategies. And in Hong Kong, we find that it's important to prevent and contain the impact of COVID-19. So we have developed a number of containment policies, for example, some social distancing policies, some identification, isolation, and treatment policy. And in order to undertake these measures, we need to have a legal basis. So I call it our legalized approach. So we have to make use of our legislations to legalize our strategy and our measures. For example, we have the public health emergencies regulations under the Prevention and Control of Disease Ordinance. We have made use of different regulations under our law, and the power given to the officials to deal with the impact of COVID-19. And lastly, we also adopt the approach of revitalize. Given the severe impact of COVID-19 on our economies, we have to develop a number of government support measures that we try to make use of to revitalize our economies. And I will share with you some of the examples about our government support measures later. In light of the social distancing and all those measures in place, we recognize that the use of modern technology is very important. And in particular, in my areas, the use of law tech is very important. And earlier this year, we have supported an organization holding the East International Commercial Arbitration Boot competition online, fully online. That's an annual big event for Hong Kong. We organize it every year, but this time we have it fully online using the NOTEC with an online dispute resolution platform. Our court, our judiciary is also using technologies for remote hearings in suitable civil cases. So they are making use of video conferencing facilities in order to keep the social distancing of our people. And one of the government support measures in this regard is we have established a law tech fund which supports small and medium-sized law firms or barrister chambers with 5 or less lawyers to procure or upgrade their information technology systems and for their related law tech trainings. This fund and this scheme is administered jointly by the Law Society of Hong Kong and the Hong Kong Bar Associations. And we provide a reimbursement to each firm or chambers up to 50,000 Hong Kong dollars in order to encourage the profession to make greater use of technology. And in addition to helping the professions, we are also helping the people, for example, by the use of the COVID-19 online dispute resolution scheme. It's a scheme operated by EPAM Center, an independent body funded by the representative from the legal and IT sectors. The schemes provides a speedy and cost-effective means to resolve COVID-19 related disputes through a multi-tier mechanism of negotiations, mediation, and arbitrations. Under the schemes, the dispute amount will be under $500,000 Hong Kong dollars, and one of the parties is a Hong Kong resident or company, and the parties agree to the use of the schemes. And this is a very affordable scheme because it's funded by the government. The parties only to pay a registration fee of $200. That's roughly 16 US dollars. So, and they can enjoy the services. So we hope that that can help some of our citizens and our businesses in case they are hard hit by the COVID-19, say because of the disruption to the supply chain and the dispute arising. There are also other government support measures that provide subsidies to particular sectors hard hit by the pandemic. And we have set aside billions of Hong Kong dollars in all these anti-epidemic measures schemes. Finally, I will share with you one of our recent initiatives that's Vision 2030 for rule of law. As I have just mentioned, we see that rule of law underpins all the 17 SDGs, and we see that it's important to promote proper understanding and recognition of the rule of law by studying its various elements through research, stakeholders, collaboration, and capacity building, contributing to sustainable development of inclusive and fair societies at both local and international levels. In my department, we have set up dedicated teams to implement these initiatives, and we have also formed a Vision 2030 task force with members from locally and also from overseas, with prominent ICJ judges, UN judges, and other distinguished profession experts. Just to tell you more, a little more about our Vision 2030 rule of law initiative, we have developed a number of programs under these initiatives. For example, we have the inaugural rule of law congress that's happening actually right now in another building. And this year we discussed different aspects of the rule of law for access to justice, capacity building, etc. And we also organize and or planning to organize a number of activities focusing on the youth to engage our younger generations, to empower our younger generations, and to provide enrichment for our profession as well. We are also planning some seminar or activities focusing on women, and we hope to promote gender equality as well. And this also echoes different aspects of the SDGs. To conclude, despite the disruptions caused by the COVID-19, Hong Kong China remains committed to contribute to the national implementation of the UN SDG by China. And I also echo some of our previous speakers that collaboration is important, and we should stand in solidarity to combat COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. James Ding. Very interesting presentation, and you also provided us a legal perspective, which some of the terms I wasn't aware of called law tech. So thank you for also enhancing my own learning in that area. Now we've heard the government presentations from China, from Japan, Mongolia, Republic of Korea, Russian Federation, and the Hong Kong SAR government of China. Now I would like to invite the representatives of civil society group from each country to share their perspective on the SDG implementation with the COVID-19 pandemic. The time limit I would like to suggest is between 3 to 5 minutes. So 3 minutes is great, 5 minutes is maximum. So again, very brief, but your interesting perspectives are welcome. I would like to first invite Mr. Xingyu Wang, the Executive Vice President of China Poverty Foundation for Poverty Alleviation. Mr. Wang, the floor is yours.
Chair, dear participants, it is my great pleasure to attend today's online forum. I'm Wang Xingzui, representing the China Foundation for Poverty Alleviation, a leading Chinese NGO that works in development, both domestically and internationally. Eliminating poverty is key to ensure the realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. By the end of this year, China will achieve the goal of eradicating extreme poverty, completing the no poverty goal 10 years ahead of the agenda. In this against poverty, mobilizing social resources and social forces is an important component, and NGOs like us play unique roles. Firstly, NGOs have mobilized substantial resources in addition to government budgets. In the 5 years from 2015 to 2019, Chinese NGOs raised a total of $65 billion, among which a considerable share was devoted to the key areas of poverty reduction, including health, education, livelihoods, ecological recovery, and emergency relief. In addition, in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, Chinese NGOs have raised $6.2 billion for domestic responses and $143 million for global responses. mainly supporting the purchase of medical equipment and the needs of vulnerable population. Secondly, play a crucial role in raising public awareness of the challenges our society is facing, and subsequently encouraging them to take actions to tackle these issues. For example, a campaign we have launched since 2014 is called No Food for 24 Hours. Between October 16th, the World Food Day, and October 17th, the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty, we call on the general public to abstain from eating for 24 hours so as to experience what it feels like to be hungry, the routine experience of many poor. In this past October, attracted more than 24 million times of reading and participation on major Chinese social media platforms. Over 18,000 people donated to support the feeding programs for children affected by the pandemic. Many of them shared that through this activity, they had to come to a better understanding of the issues like poverty and hunger. Thirdly, NGOs play the role of identifying social problems, finding innovative solutions, and establishing a model for wider action. For instance, finding the prevalent issue of students attending school without lunch in poor Western China over a decade ago, Chinese NGOs worked together implementing lunch programs targeting primary school students. After several years of concerted efforts, the Chinese government came to recognize the issue and decided to provide budget support to lunch for all the rural schools in the poor communities throughout the country. In 2015, our foundation replicated this model to Africa by launching the Smiling Children school feeding program there. As of 2019, the program had provided free meals to approximately 40,000 person a year of Sudanese and Ethiopian students. Seeing the program's effectiveness in reducing hunger, improved nutrition, and a higher school attendance rate, the Education Bureau of Addis Ababa decided to adopt the model and expand it to cover all Addis public schools. This case is a vivid illustration of how NGOs are able to establish effective mechanisms and replicable models for policy solutions, and how transnational collaboration offers valuable contributions to the realization of SDGs globally. During the COVID-19 pandemic shutdown, in response to this challenge, we replaced school feeding with food distribution at community level to ensure that these students did not go hungry at home. Working with our local partners, we've so far distributed food to over 18,000 students in Ethiopia, Myanmar, and Nepal. Moving ahead.
Mr. Wang?
Yeah.
May I interrupt you? Your time is running out. Please, if you can be brief and...
Yeah, I'm going to finish in 30 seconds. Okay. With China eliminating absolute poverty, an increasing number of Chinese NGOs will get on international development stage. In this regard, we look forward to enhancing partnership and exchanging best practices with NGOs in the Northeast Asian region and making joint efforts to accelerate the global progress in sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wang Xingjui. That's a very interesting, and we look forward to engaging with the NGOs in the region. So thank you so much, and apologies for being strict on time. Let me quickly invite the Japan Civil Society Network on SDGs in Africa Japan Forum, Mr. Masaki Inaba. Floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Very clear.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to respond. My name is Masaki Inaba, Policy Advocacy Advisor of Japan Civil Society Network on SDGs, and the country focal point of Japan for the East and Northeast Asia region of the Asia Pacific Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism. As Mr. Iwasaki, representing Japanese government, explained Japan's multi-stakeholder structure to promote SDGs, Japan takes the whole government approach, integrating multi-stakeholders in Japanese society. As civil society, I would like to introduce the experiences of the SDGs Promotion Roundtable, which is a multi-stakeholder advisory group for SDGs Promotion Headquarters. It consists of 14 members, including representatives of academia, UN agencies, business sector, trade unions, consumers movement, and civil society. Last December, Japan's SDGs implementation guiding principle, which is the highest policy strategy document of the Japanese government, was revised. The process of revision took 4 months from September to December 2019. The roundtable played a strong role to lead participatory approach for the revision of the principle. With the support of the government, the roundtable held an independent big meeting to gather information and ideas from diverse social and economic sectors, from communities, civil society, private sector, trade unions, and academia. More than 100 persons from diverse areas of Japan, from urban and rural, participated in the meeting, and many information and ideas were gathered. Based on these information, we, the roundtable, developed a policy recommendation for the revision of SDGs guidelines. In November, there was the public comment and process to provide the concept paper of guiding principle revision and get comment widely from the people. As a result, more than 25% of the comments recommended to include gender equality as the highest prioritized issue to be included in the guideline. Following the public comment, the revised guideline put gender equality as one of the 8 priority agenda. And COVID-19 had a huge impact in politics, economy, and society in Japan. The Japanese government had to concentrate in the short time measures to solve huge challenges raised by COVID-19, and it looked like that SDGs was left behind. All the members of the roundtable were concerned about the declined priority of SDGs in the situation and requested to hold the SDGs roundtable meeting in July and developed a policy recommendation letter to set SDGs as the guiding principle of governmental COVID-19 measures. Finally, all of the 14 members of the roundtable signed the letter and submitted to the Assistant Minister of the Global Issues, who is in charge of the governmental SDGs policy. Currently, the government priority for SDGs has been going up again gradually. Of course, it is not perfect, but SDGs Promotion Roundtable has been developing its role to develop a real multi-stakeholder structure to promote SDGs in Japan. Civil society has been playing the central role of the roundtable, working together with the Secretariat of SDGs Promotion Headquarters. We believe it as one of the Japan's model of SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Masaki Inaba. That was a very useful perspective that you provided from the civil society working with the government. Let me quickly go with the last 2 speakers, one from Mongolia and one from the Korea SDGs network. So first, the Mongolia, Oransoj, the Chair, Center for Human Rights and Development in Mongolia.
Thank you very much, Chair, for this opportunity. And I want to raise a question to panelists, the government representatives. Thank you very much for this very insightful presentations. And I was very impressed. And I want to know more about how the multi-stakeholder mechanism in your countries for implementation of SDGs institutionalized. And one question. And then the second question is about the localization of SDGs. How SDGs are mainstreamed in local government institutions and local development policies. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you, Oransoj. But you didn't want to make any other comment yourself. Did you want to make any comment from your perspective?
Well, the problem is that the mainstreaming SDGs in local development at local level seems quite serious task, at least in Mongolia, for example. So I think that this really needs quite specific strategies for the countries, to make SDGs real for people. So because of this, I actually would like to learn, how the other countries succeeding in such kind of task. Thank you.
So if I may, Oransoj, say
And
that...
then the second thing is, again, the multi-stakeholder mechanism is very important, But again, to involve, to attract business sector, and then also to support efforts from civil society organizations, it really needs resources in policies, in willingness, So how it's in reality in other countries? Yeah, this is my question.
Oransoj, I think in the interest of time, since you already passed 4 o'clock, which is the time for this limit, I will ask my SCAP colleagues to take this forward. And Nobuko-san, if you can ask all the government presenters to respond maybe in writing, and we can share that along with the presentations with all. That'll be very useful. Both these questions about the multi-stakeholder forum and the localization of SDGs, which is in the local government institutions and local development policies. That's a good question from Oransoj. And I would second that opportunity to get the views of each of the government presentations. So thank you so much. Oransoj, may I now then move the question, the forum to the next speaker, which is Ms. Denise Yoon, the Secretary General of Korea SDG Network. So Denise Yoon, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. So I'm Denise Yoon from Korea SDG Network, and the focal point of Northeast Asia sub-regional group of APRCM, which means the Asia Pacific Regional CSO's engagement mechanism. I'd like to point out 2 points for discussion. The first point is the SDG governance system in Korea. Since 5 years past, SDG adopted, many countries set up a comprehensive follow-up system under the top decision-making body, such as the president or prime minister for SDG implementation. 5 countries in the Northeast Asia region has also established a high-level coordination governance system, except 1 country. Despite this global trend of governance transformation, I'm so sorry about South Korea has not yet established its integrated governance coordination follow-up system for SDG implementation. Still, the charge of SDG follow-up is under the Ministry of Environment as one of the environmental policy in Korea, which has no authority to coordinate policies in 5 key areas of SDGs. Of course, it is hard to reflect the principle of no one left behind, as well as integration of 5P in its KSDGs. So that has been criticized by civil society, academics, businesses, and even other ministries. The Korean government proclaimed the renovation of sustainable development legislation and its governance system as one of the 100 national political agenda when President Moon was inaugurated in 2017. However, the agenda has been pending for 4 years. Considering Mr. Ban Ki-moon, ex-Secretary General of the UN, who is from Korea, as you know, it seems to be quite ashamed. Korean society has remarkably developed economically, socially, and politically for the last 75 years after the independence, and well responded to the COVID-19 pandemic for this year. However, in the long-term perspective, it looks quite dark. The sustainable resilience of economy, society, and environment in Korea, because there is little effort to transform the society toward sustainable development. Green New Deal policy for the economic recovery after the COVID-19 by the Korean government is also missing the concept of SDG is an example. The establishment of a comprehensive governance is the start line for the SDG implementation. It is necessary for Korean government to set up the integrated governance system urgently in order to take the same pace with global action for the SDGs. Second point for discussion is the establishment of Northeast Asian SDGs. No country achieves sustainable development without peace and partnership, which means that only collective efforts in the sub-region can provide prosperity for each country. In the point of view, I'm afraid we cannot meet North Korea here. We have common issues to address in this region. Environmental issues such as air pollution, waste management, and conservation of biodiversity. Social issues such as healthcare, gender equality, protection of social minorities like the disabled, and economic issues such as food security, low carbon energy economy, and digitalization. Particularly after the COVID-19, these common issues are highlighted more and urgently require the collective action to solve. Northeast Asian Civil Society Group pointed out these issues and suggested recommendations for collective action in our position paper that will be made statement in session 5 of tomorrow. Hopefully, all we can establish our sub-regional SDGs and take an action to close the gap among countries in this sub-region. I quite appreciate the positive mention of Chinese government and the partnership at the regional level. Northeast Asian civil society is ready to cooperate for action. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis Yoon. That was a very hopeful presentation, very succinct and to the point, so we appreciate it. And now let me at this end thank again Sang-Min Nam for a very good overview for the Northeast Asia region. Presentation was very useful to start with. And I want to thank each of the government presentations, Mr. Kei Yosheng from China, Tatsui Iwasaki from Japan, Susanna, Ms. Hong from Korea, Anton, and James Ding. Very useful presentations. If I may suggest, if you can share those presentations, because all the participants would look forward to hearing from you in terms of that. And second, the questions that Ms. Uransoj asked, the two questions about localization of the SDG policies in the local government institutions and local development policies, as well as the multi-stakeholder forum. If you have any experience, it would be good to share. I want to thank each of the 4 civil society perspectives as well. So with this, I'd like to bring this to closure. We don't have time for Q&A, unfortunately, Factor. We will move to the next session. But before that, I would like to thank you all for an active participation. I want to hand this platform back to the moderator, to the technical support team led by Irene, to make some announcements on quick housekeeping as we move forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mishra. We are now about to start session 2. And in this session, there will be 2 languages available for you to listen in, as one presenter will be speaking in Korean. So shortly, not at the moment, but shortly, you should be able to see a button at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation. And if you wish to listen to the session in English, please select English. If you wish to listen in Korean, please select Korean. Now you should be able to see the button. Go ahead and select your language of choice that you would like to listen to this session in. And if you're listening in Korean, you should be hearing Jean's voice now. I'd like to pass the microphone over to our moderator today, Mr. Takahashi. Over to you, Mr. Takahashi.
Thank you for your introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Yasuo Takahashi, Executive Director of the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, IGES, located in Japan. I'm afraid many of you don't know IGES. IGES is an environmental think tank established in 1998 by the initiative of the Japanese government, and implement policy researches on environment and sustainable development, focusing in the Asian Pacific region, in collaboration with a broad range of organizations and stakeholders, including SCAP. So today it is my great pleasure to attend this very important forum organized by SCAP and moderate one of the sessions. So now let me start session 2, reading no one behind. Lessons learned from accelerated digitalization during COVID-19 in Northeast Asia. The pandemic accelerated digitization in the society, particularly in Northeast Asia, in jobs, education, social interaction, commercial activities, and so on. But we should recognize that digitization is a kind of a double-edged sword. So from this context, this session will discuss the opportunities and challenges and share the perspectives of civil societies on this issue. As the Secretariat explained at the beginning of this session, please be informed that this session is organized by the civil society group, namely Asia Pacific Regional CSO Engagement Mechanism, and they have kindly arranged the Korean English translation during this session. So please choose a channel for Korean if you wish to listen in Korean language. We have first of this session, first part of this session, we have two presentations. So let me first invite Mr. Jonathan Wong, Chief of Technology and Innovation, SCAP, to give us an overview on the digitization in this area. Please.
Many thanks, Takahashi-san, and good morning, evening, and afternoon to you all. My name is Jonathan Wong, the Chief of Technology and Innovation at SCAP. And let me just share my screen. Is that working?
Yep, go ahead and full screen when you're ready.
Perfect. Okay, so today I'm going to share with you some kind of perspectives on policy priorities for digital transformation that leaves no one behind, and really, as Takahashi-san mentioned, drawn lessons from the pandemic. In terms of the benefits, and I think Takahashi-san said this very well. I mean, COVID-19 has accelerated the digitalization of economies and societies more than any chief technology officer or chief digital officer could do. And indeed, COVID has put many of these people out of jobs. It's funny to think of this as a benefit, but actually it has been from a digital perspective. And of course, it's really enabled kind of remote access to education, healthcare, and for all of us to continue working and doing our jobs. I think the digital economy and digital finance in particular has also provided a lifeline to millions, both in terms of governments using technology to give social protection benefits to the very poorest people, to actually allowing small businesses to continue to operate and trade. So many good things, if you like, have come about because of COVID in relation to digitalization. Indeed, things like testing and tracing technologies, obviously digitization is also the backbone of such technologies as well. But there have been challenges, and again, Takahashi-san mentioned it's a double-edged sword. Many have been left behind. Actually, not everyone has had access to the internet or digital skills. Businesses that have not gone digital have, of course, struggled more than businesses that are. The digital services that we all use today, such as Zoom and such like, have not always been available to those most in need. And there are a number of analog issues, which I'll go into later on, that have hindered many people from benefiting from digitalization during the pandemic. So I suppose the key question from a policy perspective is kind of, what should governments do to ensure that no one is left behind as a digital revolution evolves? And particularly drawing on lessons from the pandemic, I want to talk through today kind of what I see as really 6 fundamental policies to ensure inclusive digital transformation that leaves no one behind. First being inclusive ICT infrastructure, second, digital skills for all, third, open innovation, 4, a private sector that pursues a responsible and inclusive approach to digital development, 5, inclusive government digital services, and 6, analog policy agendas. I'll talk through each of these very briefly. So I think the first point is quite obvious, that last mile connectivity should be a policy priority. In Asia, 50% of people have access to the internet, 50% of people don't. I mean, and I think it's quite evident that the importance of connectivity, particularly during the pandemic. So I won't dwell on this point too much, but I think last mile connectivity should really be a policy priority. And you look at countries such as Mongolia, where we at SCAP had the pleasure of working with the Mongolian government on what was called the Nomads in a Digital Age strategy, which was Mongolia's digital strategy. And what was very commendable by the government on this policy and strategy was they put connectivity to rural agendas, rural areas as a really key policy priority within the strategy. And I think countries need to have very deliberate policies in targeting the most vulnerable and the most marginalized when it comes to connectivity, to make sure we don't kind of increase the already existing digital divide. A second important point is digital skills for all. And I think certainly for people to embrace digitalization, to benefit from digitalization, and to, if you like, be able to use the digital tools that are being deployed for the pandemic, we need digital skills for all. And again, some very concrete examples. In Bangladesh, they're very much targeting the young people within the population and have made a very kind of deliberate policy to make digitalization a national priority. In Singapore, again, they're offering adults personal accounts which they can use to buy training. I think this is really important for many of the older people and adults who may not have digital skills as a policy to aid that reskilling. And again, I think it's very important to not leave behind the very poorest people who are most likely to be displaced by technology such as AI. And again, in Singapore, they use tax incentives to encourage firms to invest in their very lowest paid workers. So I think some really interesting policy models around how you create digital skills for all. I think the third point worth mentioning is kind of the importance of open innovation. And if we think about leaving no one behind in terms of kind of leaving no country behind, I think in Singapore, open source provides a really good example. In Singapore, their Trace Together app was used to inform the Fiji deployment. Now, I think what's interesting in Asia is we have some of the most innovative countries in the world, particularly in this region. You look at China, Japan, Korea, but also some of the most technologically deprived. So if we are to leave no one behind in terms of leaving no country behind, I think certainly open sourcing is going to be really important. Also, open science will be important. You look at the time it took China to release the COVID-19 genome sequence versus SARS, which took 5 months. I think this is going to be really important so that all countries can benefit from kind of scientific know-how and scientific knowledge. In terms of kind of a private sector that pursues responsible and inclusive digital development, I think this is the key one for me. I think past digital revolutions were government-led, so things that we use every day, such as the internet and GPS, are actually government-funded. I think what's interesting about the current digital revolution, technologies such as AI and robotics are being led by the private sector. So for me, it's going to be critical that governments put in place the right policies to incentivize responsible and inclusive private sector development of technology. And I think certainly we're seeing some interesting examples out there. In the Republic of Korea, they have the Social Enterprise Promotion Act, which gives specific tax breaks and support to enterprises that are pursuing a social purpose. And this is what I mean. We need tech companies that think about doing good as well as doing well if we are to leave no one behind in the digital revolution. Similarly, in Philippines, they have the world first inclusive business accreditation scheme. Now what this is if you're a business that can prove that you're providing essential products and services to the very, very poorest people, you get tax benefits from that. And I think that's going to be really important that tech companies are incentivized through maybe policies like this to actually target the very poorest with their products and services if we are to leave no one behind, as I mentioned, during the technological revolution. I think the fifth one is really governments should really look at inclusive government digital services. Now two examples that I can give here. Again, in Bangladesh, the government of Bangladesh utilized technology for their social protection and cash transfer system for COVID-19. And again, what was interesting is they targeted this intervention at the very poorest people. I think similarly in New Zealand, the COVID trace that they had there was inclusive in terms of they tried to make the technology very useful and usable for blind people, as an example, by including things like haptic feedback capabilities within the app and voice over technologies. And indeed, the New Zealand government are also looking to use different languages other than English in a future release. So these are some very practical examples of what I mean by kind of inclusive government digital services. Now, let me just very briefly, before I close, touch upon some kind of what I call analog policy agendas, which are kind of non-digital policy agendas that are going to be very important. I think the first one is cultural norms. If we look at, for example, the mobile ownership gap between men and women. In this region, you'll see it's not really a big issue. Kind of there's a 1% gender gap. You look at South Asia, there's a 28% gender gap. I think if women in particular are to be not left behind, shall we say, I think in some regions in the Asia Pacific, they really have to look at how they close this gender gap. So that's what I mean by cultural norms. And very often it is cultural norms that drive these gender gaps, particularly on things like mobile technology. I think two other points to really mention is, I think the importance of building trust as the digital revolution evolves, and indeed misinformation. I think certainly evidence has shown that the very poorest are more susceptible to misinformation and fake news, if you like, within the digital era. So I think governments need to think very carefully about how they can work with the very biggest tech companies who run various social media platforms to actually verify information, particularly during pandemics. And I think that's going to be a really big policy agenda for governments around how do you build trust with the public? How do you deal with misinformation? If we are to leave no one behind, given that the very poorest and sometimes people who haven't had the education that many of us have had are the ones most susceptible. So I'll draw to a close there and just finish with really to ensure that as a key message, to ensure we leave no one behind as digitalization accelerates, we must put inclusion at the heart of all digital strategies. And by inclusion, I mean, we need to really think about who benefits from digitization and actually who is involved in the process of digitalization. Men, women, young, old, the rich and the poor. So I think I'll end on that point. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll hand back to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Won. You are very clear and comprehensive overview on the digitization and its implication to the society. So it's a very good basis for discussion today. Thank you. So now I would like to move to the next presentation. I would like to ask Mr. Munho Park for your presentation. He's an executive principal of National Information Society Agency of the Republic of Korea. And I understand you will make a presentation in Korean. So please, floor is yours. And please make your presentation within around 10 minutes. Please.
네, 안녕하십니까. 한국정보화진흥원의 박문호입니다. 먼저 소중한 자리에 발표하게 되어 기쁘게 생각합니다. 저희 발표 내용은 4차 산업혁명과 코로나19 그리고 디지털 정보 격차에 대해 한국의 사례를 중심으로 말씀드리고자 합니다. 다음 페이지 부탁합니다. Next page, please. Next, please. Next, please. 네. 잘 알다시피, previous, now. No. Page 3, please. 2016년 세계경제 포럼 이후로 기계학습과 인공지능의 4차 산업혁명 물결이 전 세계에 휩쓸고 대한민국 역시 정권교체 시기와 맞물리긴 하였지만 문재인 정부는 또 대통령 직속의 4차 산업혁명위원회를 구성하여 적극적인 국가 발전 계획을 수립하였습니다. 이를 통해 디지털 전환과 인공지능정보사회에 대비하기 시작하였습니다. 하지만 2019년 말 시작된 코로나19 감염병 위기와 세계적인 팬데믹 선언은 한국의 4차 산업혁명 시대의 디지털 국가 발전 전략 추진의 걸림돌로 작용하였습니다. Next, please. Next, please. 하지만 대한민국 정부의 코로나19 극복을 위해 ICT를 적극 활용하는 K-방역을 추진하는 한편 포스트 코로나 시대를 대비한 한국형 뉴딜 정책을 수립하여 바이러스 위기 상황을 오히려 사회 전반의 디지털 전환의 기회로 삼아 국가 발전의 모멘텀을 만들고 있습니다. 하지만 4차 산업혁명과 디지털 전환 그리고 코로나19 감염병 위기는 디지털 정보 격차에 대한 새로운 문제를 제기하고 있습니다. 이에 대한민국의 4차 산업혁명 대응 계획들과 코로나19 극복을 위한 K-방역 내용을 살펴보고 디지털 전환과 감염병 시대에 새롭게 대두되는 디지털 정보 격차 문제의 해결 방안에 대해서 살펴보고자 합니다. Next, please. Next page, please. 예, 4차 산업혁명은 그림에서 보는 바와 같이 인공지능, 빅데이터 그리고 디지털 기술도 촉발되는 초연결 기반 지능화 혁명으로 산업국가, 사회 전반의 변화를 유발하고 있습니다. 이에 문재인 정부는 과학기술정보통신부 등 경제부처럼 물론 교육부 등 전 부처가 참가하는 대통령 직속의 4차 산업혁명위원회를 조직하였습니다. Next, please. Next page, please. 대한민국 정부는 4차 산업혁명과 디지털 전환을 위한 국가 전략으로 2017년 11월 지능화 혁신 프로젝트, 성장 동력 기술력 확보, 산업 인프라 생태계 조성, 미래사회 변화 대응 등 4대 추진 과제로 구성된 아이코리아 4.0 계획을 수립하였습니다. Next, please. 또한 2019년 1월에는 데이터 가치 사슬 전주기 활성화, 세계 수준의
data and AI-based economy was established with 3 major assignments, including activation for the entire data value chain, ecosystem building for the world-class AI, and promotion of convergence of data and AI. In December 2019, under the slogan of Toward AI Powerhouse Beyond IT Powerhouse, to realize people-centered AI was the national strategy was formulated. Please go to the next slide.
Next, please.
Next one.
그러나 데이터 네트워크 AI 기반의
The
page, please.
page 8. Please go to the page 8.
디지털 전환 전략은
The digitization strategy based on data, network, and AI is in the face of the crisis driven by COVID-19. But on the basis of openness and transparency and cooperation between medical staff and citizens, from testing, quarantine, management of patients and contact and prevention by making use of ICT in each phase of quarantine efforts, we have developed successful response methods which had led to K-quarantine, a global standard of infectious disease management. Please go to the next slide.
Next page, please.
9 page.
ICT를 활용한 K 방역의 대표적
Let us take a look at what constitutes K-quarantine. In connection with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Health Insurance Review and Assessment Service, information of entrance is acquired. Making use of this information from SMS guideline and information sharing with medical institutions to management of latent period, we have forged a smart quarantine system. Please go to the next slide.
또한 입국자의 방문국가 파악을 위해
To find out the entrance record of visit to other countries, the international roaming data sharing process was introduced to provide overseas travel information to CDC. And the slide shows how each process works. Please go to the next slide. As we can see from the figure, self-diagnosis application was developed for ongoing health monitoring. Please go to the next slide.
해외도 널리 알려졌고 또 여러 나라들이 도입하기도 한 drive-through
and walk-through testing centers were adopted by many countries, which were introduced for specimen sampling. Please go to the next slide. Epidemiological investigation to know movements of confirmed patients, making use of smart city platform collecting and processing massive urban data, is carried out with the automated system. Go to the next slide, please. To prevent the spread of COVID-19 and effectively manage self-quarantined people based on GIS, an automatic alert is sent off to government officials monitoring them one-on-one base, which is self-quarantine safety protection app. Please go to the next slide. In addition, the information system for negative pressure beds and patient management information system enable us to understand the operation of medical facilities and patient status. And Global Care Service making use of artificial intelligence is offered, which provides phone consultation and response. Please go to the next slide. Korean government made public official data to lead voluntary participation from the private sector in response to infectious disease. A case in point is facial mask application. National Health Review and Assessment Service made their data publicly available for the private sector to make use of them. Please go to the next slide. Also, since 2005, the government introduced the emergency alert testing system, and the system was actively made use of for COVID-19 as well. COVID-19 related information, occurrence, movement of patients, government briefings, and other guidelines are supplied through COVID-19 micro page, which is operated by the government. Please go to the next slide. Please go to the next slide. I will skip the slide. As such, success factors of K-quarantine can be the combination of publicly available data and creative idea by civilian developers. The government, responding to the fourth industrial revolution age, has actively supported the development of artificial intelligence industry and pushed ahead with innovation and digitization in an effort to improve the public service. In the end, ICT plays an essential role in the response to COVID-19 in Korea. ICT is directly connected with life of citizens, health and medical services beyond the social and economic dimension. Please go to the next slide. The spread of intelligence technology in the fourth industrial revolution may produce positive effects across the board, but difference in accessibility and use of the continually advanced digital skills may aggravate social and economical inequality more than before. The crisis triggered by infectious disease has accelerated online education, smart working, and unchecked economy, which brings about other gaps and divides. In particular, the level of informatization of the vulnerable, including persons with disabilities and the elderly, is 70% of that of ordinary citizens. In particular, ICT used by the elderly is lower than the OECD average. Digital divide is emerging as another social issue. Please go to the next slide. Let us look at the information gap in Korea. Digitalization of persons with disabilities, low-income class, farmers and fishermen, and the elderly continue to improve every year, but still remains 70% that of ordinary citizens. Please go to the next slide. As we can see from the slide, the level of digitization by class is only 69% 0.9% that of 2019. Please go to the next page. Besides, in terms of the use of internet by class, ordinary citizens are 91.8%, the vulnerable is only 76.1%. And the ownership of a smartphone is only 76.1% for the vulnerable, which is relatively low. Please go to the next slide. Meanwhile, the digital environment after COVID-19 has changed in many aspects. Unmanned and untapped digital transformation spreads in our daily lives. Thus, O2O market has expanded and discriminations between users and non-users of O2O services aggravated. Please go to the next slide. Since the COVID-19 crisis, increase in online shopping, remote work, and online school, digital divide is worsening in our daily lives, widening economical and social gaps. Please go to the next slide.
Would you please try to summarize?
요약해 주시겠습니까? Yeah, this is Fourth Industrial Revolution and intelligent information require advanced digital capacity for individuals to participate in social and economic activities. This means the vulnerable with poor digital capacity, such as the elderly and persons with disabilities, may be more excluded. AI voice assistant, robots translating into sign language typify the efforts to improve information accessibility for the vulnerable using intelligence technology. Digitalization is unavoidable across the society, and digital divide beyond the inconvenience in daily lives has emerged as the issue of exclusion. Digital divide in the age of infectious disease has become the matter of survival transcending the social exclusion. Please go to the last slide. Informatization and digitalization are a new foundation for the nation's development in the age of fourth industrial revolution, but aggravates gaps and divide. Informatization and digitization are a cornerstone in enhancing transparency and overcoming infectious disease. But spread of infectious disease accelerates digital transformation of our society. Amid such change for everyone to be part of the digital world and enjoy its benefits, we need to do something to prevent and respond to infectious disease. Digital divide between different nations need to be addressed. Please go to the next slide. Next slide, please. In June 2020, to resolve the issue of digital divide in the age of the fourth industrial revolution and infectious disease, the Korean government has formulated a digital inclusive plan. Please go to the next page. I wanted to deliver lots of useful information, but please understand that I can't do so because of time limitation. Thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Park, for your very informative presentation on various initiatives in Korea to address COVID-19 pandemic, utilizing ICT, and how to tackle digital divide, including many concrete examples and good suggestions. Sorry for the time limitation. So I would like to move to the second part of the session. We have 5 discussants to make input from the input of the civil society perspective on this issue. So I'd like to ask all the discussants for the time limitation. Please limit your intervention within 5 minutes. So the first discussant is Ms. Yiping Kai, Executive Committee Member, Development Alternative with Women for New Era China. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. As many countries in Northeast Asia expanded their step towards aging society, in parallel, there's unprecedentedly rapid development of the internet, new ICTs, technology innovation, and digitalization in this region, which have been integrated into all aspects of people's daily life. How to ensure, here I want to just talk about in specific group, the vulnerable group, which is elderly people, how to ensure they're not potentially left out in the digital society caused a tremendous challenge, as the speaker has already pointed out, especially in the context of COVID-19. The UN policy brief, Impact of COVID-19 on Older Persons, outlined the negative impact of the digital divide on older persons, both in developed and developing countries. Many old persons has limited access to digital technologies and lack unnecessary skills to fully exploit them. The barriers that older persons face relate to the literacy and language, including visual and hearing impairments, may be amplified during the COVID-19 crisis. Therefore, they are often exposed to the exclusion from the basic services such as public transportation, health, banking, especially the most vulnerable group, poor, illiterate, ethnic minorities, rural, and disabled old people. This became even more evident during the pandemic when the apps and digital devices are utilized for contact tracking, and many services are only provided via internet. We have seen from news media reports and footage on the plates of the old persons during the COVID-19, such as old people driven off the bus by drivers and passengers because which is required to board the public transport. Or they were turned away at the door of clinic because they didn't know how to make an online appointment in advance. In another case, women street vendors selling the fruits and vegetables ask customers whether they can pay by cash instead of paying by mobile phone, because she said, if you scan the code and pay by phone, the money will directly transfer to my son's bank account. I'm not receiving any money and I need money to buy food. After all, only limited number of, for example, in case of China, it's 51% of people over 60 use electronic payment, according to a survey. We also see many heartwarming stories in the media. Railway stations set up a special channel at the entrance to serve those passengers who do not have mobile devices or cannot show the healthy codes. Hospitals open a special window, provide services to the elderly, and young volunteers are tutoring and accompanying elderly people how to use smartphone and surf the internet in the community. All these stories from the ground make people to reflect on how to ensure that older persons are not left behind in the digital age. It requires the synergy and the coordinated efforts from government, from business sectors, and civil societies. Here are some recommendations for consideration. One, to ensure the policies and measures, including the temporary measures aiming at contain the pandemic, are aligned with the existing laws and policies on the protection of rights and interests of elderly people, which already exist in many countries. Second, to recognize that elderly people are also active learners, so the technology innovation and digital products and services should adapt to and meet their needs. For example, to develop mobile phone with large screens, loud volume, and large fonts, and simplified operating systems. Third, optimize the application of e-government services to ensure the basic public service in station, airport, park, banks, hospitals, shopping malls, and other public places, provide necessary information guidance and manual assistance. For example, establishing green channels and adopt alternative measures and retaining cash payment and offline processing channels to improve face-to-face services. And fourth, civil societies and communities can introduce technological service resources and conduct trainings course for the use of digital products for the elderly people. Fifth, strengthen social inclusion and solidarity, including the intergenerational solidarity during the physical distancing, and provide social support measures and targeted care for older persons. including assisting their access to digital technology and devices and services. Lastly, but not least important, pay special attention to the most vulnerable groups among elderly people, the poor, the rural, the women, and the old people with physical impairment, to address their needs and eradicate the digital barriers. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Kai, for your very clear presentation focusing on the issue relating to the elderly people, which is a common challenge for aging society, including Japan. So now move to the second discussant, Mr. Masaki Inaba, Japan Civil Society Network on SDGs and African Japan Forum. Mr. Inaba, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? No problem. Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. As Mr. Myung-woo Park stated in his presentation, it is necessary to focus on population vulnerable and thus difficult to catch up with the rapid trend of digitalization. Given that civil society includes the communities left behind and people in diverse situations of vulnerability and organizations playing the key role to protect their human rights, dignity, and sovereignty, we need to focus on challenges of urgent digitalization on these people and society. First, I would like to introduce our experiences in the G20 Japan Summit and the civil society advocacy at Civil 20, one of the 8 engagement groups that ensure multi-stakeholder element for the G20. Japan had a G20 summit in last year, 2019. Japanese civil society said the Civil 20 Digital Economic Working Group as the counterpart of G20 Digital Economic Working Group in Civil 20 as one of the 12 working groups in Civil 20. The mission of the working group was to develop policy paper on digital economy, especially data governance, which was one of the key agenda of G20 Osaka Summit. We identified 5 areas of challenges of digitalization, including rights issues, social concerns, environmental concerns, equity issues, and the governance. We put priority on rights issues, especially rights to protect personal information against the G20 discourse, as data is the oil of 21st century and data free flow with trust. We set the principle that data is human rights and not for sale. And when the government and the private sector recognize that data is the 21st century's oil for sale, it is difficult to establish trust between people on the ground and the government and private sector. Actually, under COVID-19 crisis, digitalization has been inevitably accelerated. In Japan, there have been many challenges under the digitalization under COVID-19. Under stay-home situation, the opportunity of education through online have been provided more unequal, depending on the incomes and the social capitals of each households and communities. COVID-19 pandemic made huge destructive impacts for small and medium enterprises run by aged owners, especially rural areas. In Japan, digitalization hasn't been so accelerated in social security and welfare systems because the beneficiaries are usually aged or handicapped and not accustomed with digital technology. If digitalization is more introduced in social security and welfare sector, it will be more difficult and they will be more dependent for their supporters. It is somewhat good if charity organizations are more developed and support them more, but at the same time, it will be more difficult for them to keep the dignity and sovereignty as individuals in the society. Finally, I would like to introduce an alternative concept of digitalization, named a comprehensive framework of appropriate technology choice for sustainable development, advocated by a Japanese NGO, Asia People's Exchange, which has led appropriate technologies. The framework focuses on the three thematic areas: poverty and inequality, environment and natural resources, and thirdly, dehumanization. In digitalization era under COVID-19, we need to focus more on dehumanization. As a human being and communities, we need to resist dehumanization. We need to control technologies as human, not to be controlled by technology. To avoid dehumanization and protect human dignity and sovereignty, we need to prioritize technologies controllable by people, technologies that develop real capacity of the people, and respect non-commercial activities in the communities and society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Inaba, for your presentation, explaining the Japanese situation and the challenges for Japan society, and also including the suggestions for the appropriate technology. Then I would like to move to the third discussant, Ms. Sarankuku Sharvdor, Program Manager of the Center for Human Rights and Development, Mongolia. Ms. Sharvdor, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so thank you for this opportunity. So I also agree with the previous speakers also mentioned about this digitalization. So I want to share about the opportunities and the issues of digitalization in the pandemic. So Mongolia has like total population of 3.3 million people, but there are a few opportunities based on the internet, number of the internet users or the number of the smartphone users. For example, like as of January 2020, there were 2.2 million internet users in Mongolia, which is the 67% of the total population. Another opportunity is the number of smartphone users were 3.2 million, which is 97% of the total population. And also the internet access across the country is like 312 out of total 330 homes are connected with the fiber optic cable internet, which can be said that like Mongolian people, almost every person have smartphone, and every person can have access to the internet, even the rural areas. And but the thing is that the half of the internet users were at this the Ulaanbaatar city, which means that we cannot say that the people from the rural areas are meaningfully engaged through through this internet. And another opportunity is on the education. So government of Mongolia has suspended all the educational deliveries and facilities starting from January 2020. At the same time, in order to continue the studies of students, the government has prepared online courses and tele-lessons in the several languages such as Mongolian, Kazakh, Turan, and Sign language, which are available through the students, their parents and teachers, and they were disseminated through the 16 different television channels. And it has covered almost 900,000 children of Mongolia. And also another one is due to the pandemic, state deliveries through the new digital technologies, such as recently introduced Mongolia applications enable the citizens to receive 16 types of reference, which helps us to avoid from the public gathering. So there were this, so these kinds of digitalization accelerated and enabled us to face this pandemic issues. But there are a few issues due to these opportunities. For example, the quality of TV lessons. The Research Institute has conducted the assessment on the TV lessons, And the study covered 10 MX and 3 districts from the Ulaanbaatar. And this assessment shows that the quality of tele-lessons are lower than the quality of lessons taught in the classroom. For example, 36% of the students surveyed that the skills of teachers who teach on the television are not good as those teachers in the classroom. And also 57% of the students rated that the speed and the comprehensibility of the television lessons are moderate or poor. And another one is the 16% of the students responded that they didn't have access to the TV lesson. So this means that those children of herders and the marginalized groups are the most affected to this distance education or the digital technologies. And another issue came from this digitalization is the lack of capacity of the people from the rural areas, especially in using the new communication tools and platforms. So even pandemic accelerated the use of new communicating tools, which gave us the opportunity to engage virtually, study and work from home. However, the people from rural areas are facing challenges, which is the lack of the capacity. For example, the national CSOs, when national CSOs want to connect or engage with the local CSO or local people, we had to teach the use of technology step by step.
Would you please, sorry,
summarize? Yeah. Okay. So in other words, this is an evidence that people are capable of using social media such as Facebook doesn't mean that they are capable of using internet browser or smartphone in effective ways. So in order to engage with local citizens, to leave no one behind, we need to build their capacity to use the technologies and internet browsers. And also the last one, which is the recommendation that the government of Mongolia needs to use the new participatory methods, including the use of new digital technologies, which will increase the capacity of teachers and enhance the quality of educations. And also, the government of Mongolia should introduce and deliver its service through new technologies, both at national and the local level, in order to build the capacity of local people. So in that case, we will leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shabdor, for your comments covering both challenges and opportunities based on the situation in Mongolia. Then I would like to move to the next discussant, Mr. Jawon Byung, Solidarity Against Disability Discrimination, Republic of Korea. Please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I'm very glad to see you to share my presentation. In session 2, Leaving No One Behind, especially the subject of lessons learned from accelerated digitalization during COVID-19 in South Korea. I will share the idea and the status in terms of the disability situation. Hello, my name is Jae-won Byun, a director of policy in Solidarity Against Disability Discrimination based on Seoul. Okay, next. Please, next slide. Okay, before starting share the subject, I will show you the overview to understand the current situation in South Korea. As some of you might know, South Korea is one of the leading country in ICT field. At the left side, you can see the rank of penetration, especially in internet and smartphone. On internet penetration, South Korea is #1 in Asia, and also the smartphone penetration is #1 in the world. Not only the penetration rates, but also the mobile internet speed is 3.4 times faster than the world average, and also Korea, which was the first in the world to commercialize 5G network service, according to Pulse newspaper. Next. Okay, so So what survivor strategies will remain during COVID-19 era? I will introduce two jargon, which is on-tact or on-tact. Okay, first, on-tact means that through online activities, not only various company events, but also social networking, club activities, and even the love business. And during COVID era, we call it online tact, so called on-tact as a daily routine. Um, Furthermore, on-tact is a jargon which means that a new unfamiliar word that appeared with the new COVID-19 era. So on means the not add to the word and text, so we can understand untact means a no contact business. So at the right side, you can see some pictures and the articles of rising untact marketing service in the field and also significantly increase untact theme stock in the market. Next. Okay, so when it comes to disability in South Korea, I would like to I would like to show you the untact-based approach problem, especially in people with disability in South Korea. There are two problems I will show you. First is not universal design facilities, especially inaccessible kiosks for wheelchair users. Wheelchair users have to order their food in the restaurant during COVID era, mostly kiosk, but we can't because of its height. And also irregular user interface system of app setting block they're using through the smartphone. Next. Okay, so, and furthermore, what problems exist on tech, online tech-based approach of disability in their online communication in during COVID-19 era? First problem is the distance learning system, especially for developmental children. They cannot understand totally distance learning, and also teachers who have disability have difficulty to use this distance learning system like a Zoom or a Google Meet system. And also you can see some citizens have to pay their tax using home taxation online system, but we can't because of its accessibility guideline doesn't meet the for blind people. So these are the problem I would like to show you. Okay, so next.
Would you please summarize?
Okay, I will. So we can conclude that we in South Korea no worries about the penetration of internet or quality of speed smartphone, but we really need those things. First, update and revise accessibility guideline. Second, universal design facilities. Third, all welcome contents. Next, last session. Okay, but the most important premise is that not totally depending on IT or Internet of Things, IoT technology, but government should strengthen public care service in face-to-face for leaving no one behind really. Thanks. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bjorn, for your presentation, including many concrete examples and clear recommendation. Now, I move to the final discussant, Mr. Mikhail Petrosyan, Advisor to Director General on International Cooperation, ANO Digital Economy. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you for all. And I understand that we are in time constraint and in time limits, so I will do it in the fast mode. So firstly, I would like to introduce myself. I'm an advisor to our Director General, and our organization is established jointly by the Russian government and Russian digital enterprises in the framework of the Russian national program, which is named Digital Economy. And, the coronavirus pandemic continues, and Russia is not an exception. But I would like to stress that our government and private sector are doing their best to prevent a new lockdown. I would like to stress that digital technologies are playing their core role in these no lockdown activities, and they played a key role in Russian resilience to COVID-19 in the very beginning of the pandemic. And this became possible because much has been done prior to pandemic. I mean, the digital government services, so the minimization of the use of cash, remote delivery of food, remote education. Much has been done by the government itself and the private sector at a high pace and quite prior to the pandemic. It's also relevant to one of the cross-cutting technologies, which is right now on, of course, of its hype, but everyone understands how it is important. I'm talking about the artificial intelligence. Last year, our president adopted a national strategy for artificial intelligence, and it institutionalized our national approach in this field. And I would like to stress that AI has played and has been playing its specific role in our COVID-19 resilience, because it has made possible to make forecasting with an accuracy of 1 day, and to use a data-driven approach in making decisions by the government and by business. And this forecasting also is done by our Center of Excellence, SBERV, I mean Center of Excellence for Artificial Intelligence. Of course, the AI is actively being used for healthcare purposes. I mean, the computer vision for analyzing the computer tomography of lungs, measure temperature distantly, and of course, also to support quarantine measures. In general, digital technologies in Russia, I mean, the usage of it toward the COVID-19 resilience, I would like to divide in 3 categories. So one is to provide remote lifestyle education work available for society. Second is to provide social distancing and COVID tracing. It is right now is being implemented because the government is now introduced the QR code measures when the society is using the restaurants, shops, and so on. So, and the third issue is, of course, as I have already mentioned, the user in healthcare, for example, chatbots with machine learning system for self-checking the symptoms of COVID-19. I would like to associate myself with the challenges pointed out in the presentation of Mr. Wong. Digital skills, yes, so we have a special federal project which contains specific measures in the roadmap to promote this sphere. And concerning, for example, the ICT connectivity, the president introduced in his the document which is about the national strategy and the national goals, and one of the national goals is to by 2030 is to provide ensure an increase in the access of households on the whole territory to broadband access to the internet up to 97% by 2030. Yes, the last point that, of course, the challenges is also about the ethics and the privacy. And I would like to stress that the Russian government and business themselves are paying much attention to this aspect because much amount of data is involved in this above mentioned processes, and we need to ensure that the privacy is well delivered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Petrosyan, including a very interesting information on in Russia how AI is used for address the pandemic. So we finished input from the 5 very valuable inputs from the discussants. And because of the time limitation, we don't have much time for discussion. But we have received very interesting comments from one of the audience. So I would like to ask Mr. Nao Tanaka from Apex to take the floor to share your comments. And after that, I would like to ask someone from the discussant or speakers to respond to his comment. So, Mr. Please, the floor.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to make a comment. I'm Nao Tanaka from Asian People's Exchange, or APEX, one of NGOs in Japan. In my opinion, digital technology will bring about positive impact and also negative impact. So as a positive impact, it will bring about convenient society, enabling teleworks, widening education chance, enabling new healthcare services, and so forth. But we must also consider it will have some various negative impact to the society, such as it will bring about significant problems of unemployment, and also problems of dehumanization. By dehumanization, I mean subordination to machines and technologies accompanied with a decline of human capacity, the variation of human life, and weakening of human relations. It may, how to say, weaken community relationships and relationship among people, among family, and so forth. So I think we have to consider both positive impact and also negative impact of digitalization. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tanaka, for your very interesting comments. And are there anyone who would like to respond to his comment at the final part of this session? Mr. Wong, please.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Tanaka raises a very important point. I think there's a lot of hype around the positives around digitalization, and not so much of a realization and discussion on what these negatives are. Future of work and unemployment is going to be a huge issue as it comes. But I want to touch upon this point around dehumanization, and I think it's very important to touch upon this. And I think Mr. Inaba also touched upon this, on the importance of ensuring that technology makes people better, not just the other way around. So I'll give you an example of how I think about this. People talk a lot about ensuring that AI doesn't have biases. But in my mind, another way of looking at it is, how can AI help us to realize our own biases? So for example, I would love it if an AI told me that, Jonathan, when you shortlisted candidates for this position, did you realize you were discriminating against age and this certain race? I think certainly how we can use technology to make us better human beings should be something that we should take into account. And also, I mean, I don't think digitization is a foregone conclusion. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. I don't think it's beyond the realms of imagination that maybe in 20 years' time, we as consumers, when we pick up a piece of clothing that says made by human, may not pay a premium for this product, as an example. I think certainly, I think it's not beyond the realms of imagination that actually we'll yearn more for the human touch, yearn more for products and services that are more human, and yearn more for products that are maybe made by hand and not made by machine. So it'll be interesting to see how this whole digitization debate plays out. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very comprehensive comments on this issue. And it's a very good, I think, kind of summary for this session. of course, there are many other issues to be discussed, and but for the time constraint, I'd like to finish this session. But I think today we have a very good discussion, the information sharing concerning the opportunities and the challenges relating to the issue of digitization and its implication to the society. And based on the many concrete examples and concrete suggestions. So I think it's a very useful occasion to deepen our discussion, and I really hope this is a very good occasion to enhance further our collaboration and communication in this region on this issue, because digitization, I strongly feel that hearing your discussion, it directly impact our human life, daily life. And also they have a very strong, I think, power to transform our society substantially. So it's a very important issue to be discussed continuously in our society and region. So, and I hope ESCAP also will play a very important role to promote constructive discussions on this issue in this region. So thank you very much for the organizer and all the speakers and also the audiences for your participation to this session today. I think we can have a very fruitful discussion. So I'd like to close the session for today, and I will start at the same time tomorrow at 3 p.m. Korea time. So I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.